Chapter 1059. It was Chu Xiu's first time meeting the famous old celestial master. If he could only describe the old celestial master with one word, it would be old. His hair and beard were all white, and his face was full of wrinkles. He wore a loose gray Taoist robe and reclined lazily on a bamboo chair. He looked just like an old man from a farmer's family, and he even gave off a benevolent vibe. Of course, if one thought that the old celestial master was a benevolent old man, it would only prove that one was very naive. The old celestial master was currently enjoying his retirement in the back mountain of Mount Jianghu. However, when the old celestial master was in charge of the celestial master abode, his reputation was not just for show. Instead, it was because of thunder. Chu Xiu had wanted to see if the old celestial master had any impression of his current appearance. However, after seeing the old celestial master, Chu Xiu was a little disappointed. The old celestial master probably did not recognize him. The old celestial master looked at Chu Xiu, sizing him up. He wasn't surprised. Chu Xiu thought about it and felt relieved. 500 years ago, the old celestial master was just an ordinary disciple of the celestial master abode. He was just a young Taoist priest, not a young one. At that time, there were many talents and powerhouses everywhere, so he was not famous. It was unknown if he had even seen Dugu Weiwei. Of course, the old celestial master said that he had seen Dugu Weiwei and that there was nothing special about Dugu Weiwei, who only had a nose and 2 eyes. To others, it seemed like he was bragging. However, the old celestial master was the only martial artist who had survived that era. Even if he was bragging, no one would know. The old celestial master's name was Zhang Yinyuan. Chu Xiu had asked Lu Jiang River if he had heard of this name before. Lu Jiang River's answer was no. At that time, the few powerhouses of Mount Jianghu did not have this name. Clearly, the old celestial master was a nobody back then. Chu Xiu and old celestial master looked at each other for a long time before Chu Xiu cupped his fists and said, "Greetings, old celestial master." Glancing at Zhang Qingzhen, Chu Xiu smiled and said, "Brother Zhang, long time no see." Zhang Qingzhen said with an indifferent expression, "A day in the cave is 1,000 years in the world. For cultivators, time is only divided into the period before and after comprehending the Tao. There is no difference in the length of time." Chu Xiu raised his eyebrows. Since when did Zhang Qingzhen learn to be tactful? Was he infected by those monks? The old heavenly master glanced at Zhang Qingzhen. "If you have something to say, just say it. If you have something to say, just say it. If you have something to say, just say it. You don't have anything to do with this kid, and you've even forgotten the last time you met him. Don't beat around the bush. Don't learn from those bald donkeys." The elderly celestial master had spoken so bluntly that even Zhang Qingzhen, who had always been calm, felt a little awkward. Old celestial master turned to look at Chu Xiu and narrowed his eyes. "Devil Lord Official Chu?" In front of old celestial master, no one dares to address themselves as sir, Chu Xiu said. Old celestial master slowly straightened his back and stared at Chu Xiu. "You should know your current status and reputation in the pugilistic world. Aren't you afraid that I'll make you stay here by coming to my celestial master abode at a time like this? Don't think that I'll care about my reputation of bullying the weak. I'm already so old. So what if I'm embarrassed? I can't bring it underground anyway." Chu Xiu shook his head. "I believe you won't do that, old celestial master." A look of interest appeared on the old celestial master's face. "You know, but I don't even know if I'll do it." Chu Xiu said calmly, "All these years, I've been doing things in the celestial master abode. I've never sought to make any mistakes. I've always been very stable. Old celestial master, you won't make a move unless you're 100% confident that you can keep me here and resist the holy sect's revenge." The old celestial master suddenly rose to his feet. The benevolent expression on his face suddenly disappeared, and a powerful aura was released around him. In an instant, wind and lightning surged, forming a deafening thunderstorm in the air. "Are you saying that I won't be able to make you stay even if I try my best? Do you really think so little of me?" Chu Xiu's expression didn't change at all. He still looked calm. "I'm not looking down on you, Old Celestial Master. I'm just confident in myself. Old Celestial Master's aura suddenly disappeared. It was as if the thunderstorm was just an illusion. Young man, you have guts. But you didn't take such a risk to come up Dragon Tiger Mountain just to see me, did you? Old Celestial Master lay back on his bamboo chair and returned to his old and frail appearance. Chu Xiu said in a deep voice, I don't want to keep you in suspense, Old Celestial Master. I'm here for one thing. The news of Ling Yunzi gathering all the righteous Dao sects to destroy the Kunlun devil cult has spread throughout the world. Your sect's Taoist Zhang Daoling will probably be back soon. That's why I just want Celestial Master Abode to stay out of this. Old Celestial Master looked at Chu Xiu strangely. I'm righteous and you're the devil. This matter was brought up by the Chunyang Dao sect, and all the righteous Dao sects in the world agreed. Celestial Master Abode is also a righteous Dao sect, and we're the leader of the Dao sections. How dare you persuade us not to make a move? Isn't this a joke? But what good will it do to the Celestial Master Abode if we make a move? Chu Xiu sat in front of Old Celestial Master and poured himself a cup of tea from Old Celestial Master's teapot. He said plainly, the Dao sects aren't suitable for doing things that are too radical, but the Chunyang Dao sect is an exception. As the sect master, although Ling Yunzi is rational enough, his personality is much more radical than other Dao martial artists. Ling Yunzi can't see it, but you should be able to, Old Celestial Master. Me rebuilding the Kunlun devil cult and gathering all the fiendish Dao martial artists to the Kunlun mountain is actually beneficial to the situation in the world. The news of Patriarch Dugu's reincarnation has spread, and the pugilistic world is bound to be full of devils and all sorts of evil spirits. But looking at the current pugilistic world, it's just that the momentum is a little bigger. I've recruited people from all sides into the Kunlun devil cult in exchange for peace in the pugilistic world. If Ling Yunzi wants to start a war again, I'll accompany him to the end. But in fact, the Central Plains warriors are the ones suffering. Old Celestial Master said with a faint smile, so you're saying that you built the Kunlun devil cult for the sake of the Central Plains warriors? Chu Xiu shook his head. Of course I don't think so. But as long as the sect master doesn't appear, the orthodox Dao and the fiendish Dao can still maintain this balance. It's a good thing for everyone. Of course, now that Ling Yunzi wants to start a war, the Kunlun devil cult will naturally accompany him to the end. I think that even if you know the news, Old Celestial Master, you probably won't make a move this time. Why do you know this old man so well? Chu Xiu said in a deep voice. I've said it before. All these years, Old Celestial Master, you've never done anything radical. If you weren't 100% confident, you'd never make a move. The moon-worshipping cult is in West Chu, not far from the Celestial Master's abode. If the Celestial Master's abode can accommodate Yi Shaonan, why can't they accommodate me, Chu Xiu? Old Celestial Master glared at him. Since that's the case, why did you come to the Celestial Master's abode when you're certain that I won't make a move? Isn't this unnecessary? Aren't you afraid that I'll go to the Kunlun mountain to cause trouble for you if you anger me? Chu Xiu shook his head. I'm certain that you won't make a move, but you're not the only person in charge of the Celestial Master's abode. I just don't want to see the Celestial Master's abode being bewitched by others. Old Celestial Master stroked the beard on his chin. The way he looked at Chu Xiu was a little strange. If Chu Xiu wasn't bluffing, then his control over people's hearts was really amazing. Most importantly, how old was he? Old Celestial Master knew that age didn't mean everything. Some people were still stupid even after living their whole lives. However, Old Celestial Master couldn't help but be surprised when he saw a young man stirring up such a storm. Old Celestial Master subconsciously glanced at Zhang Qingjin. Fortunately, Zhang Qingjin didn't feel jealous or depressed. His Taoist heart was still stable. Zhang Qingjin had his own path to walk. No matter how impressive Chu Xiu was, it wasn't a path he wanted to walk. At that moment, someone pushed open the door to Old Celestial Master's courtyard. Zhang Daoling hurried in. When he saw Chu Xiu, he was shocked. He pointed at Chu Xiu, so shocked that he couldn't speak. In his own sect, Zhang Daoling naturally wouldn't put his perception to the maximum. So he only sensed that there was someone in old Celestial Master's courtyard. He thought it was just another disciple coming to ask old Celestial Master about martial arts. He didn't expect it to be Chu Xiu. At that moment, Zhang Daoling didn't know what to say. Leave Chu Xiu here? It seemed like he came back to Celestial Master's abode to ask this question. Was he supposed to greet Chu Xiu? Chu Xiu looked at old Celestial Master and smiled. Look, there's someone with a different opinion. I think Priest Zhang must have brought the attitude of Chunyang Dao sect. But I believe that old Celestial Master will make the right choice. I won't disturb you anymore. Old Celestial Master nodded and said slowly, You don't plan to stay and have a taste of my vegetarian food? Chu Xiu shook his head. An inexplicable smile appeared on his lips. It had a hint of blood in it. No, I like to eat meat. After Chu Xiu left the mountain, Zhang Daoling frowned and asked, Old Celestial Master, what is Chu Xiu doing here? Old Celestial Master said impatiently, He's doing what you're doing here. Why is the alliance of the orthodox sects that you and Ling Yunzi made like a sieve? There are holes everywhere. You haven't even made a move yet, but they've already received the news. Why, do you have to be polite before killing? I'm going to draw my sword. Are you ready? Old Celestial Master shook his head. The warriors of this generation had not experienced troubled times. Their methods were a little primitive. Chapter 1060. In the eyes of the outside world, Zhang Daoling was the dignified and just person in charge of the Taoist master's residence. But in front of the old Taoist master, he was just like the little Taoist boy back then. Even when he was reprimanded by the old Taoist master, he did not say a word. In fact, this matter really had nothing to do with him. It was the Chunyang Dao sect's carelessness that leaked the news to those small forces. Who knew if they had spies from the diabolism or something like that? But Zhang Daoling did not refute. He only said in a low voice, Then, old Taoist master, should we make a move this time or not? The old Taoist master sighed and said, What's there to make a move for? Chu Xiu has already come to us. Look at his attitude, he is fearless. Does he look like he is afraid? What if he is bluffing? The old Taoist master squinted and said, Although I am old, I am not to the point of being blind. Even if this kid's acting is good, and he is bluffing and even deceiving me, it is not a big deal. This time, with so many sects making a move, with the momentum of the Chunyang Dao sect, the Jianghu sect, the Great Light Temple, and the Sabodhi Temple, do you think they are afraid of me? Afraid of the Taoist master's residence? Whether or not the Taoist master's residence goes or not, it will not play the most crucial role. The last straw that breaks the camel's back is not the Taoist master's residence. Zhang Daoling said, If Chu Xiu cannot hold on and the diabolism is destroyed, but the Taoist master's residence did not make a move in this battle, will it affect the reputation of the Taoist master's residence? The old Taoist master scolded, Idiot! Can't you bring a group of people to lie in ambush around Kunlun Mountain? If Chu Xiu can hold on, you can take it as you bringing people to the west to enjoy the scenery. If Chu Xiu cannot hold on, you can follow him to Kunlun Mountain and clean up the mess. Anyway, as long as you appear, who cares if you contribute or not? Zhang Daoling was stunned. He hesitated and said, But if that's the case, isn't the Taoist master's residence stealing the credit? You obviously didn't do anything, but in the end, you want to share the fame. The old Celestial Master sighed and shook his head. Dao Ling, you've managed the Celestial Master Mansion very well all these years. Even when I was in charge of the Celestial Master Mansion, I didn't do as well as you did. But do you know why I still haven't handed over all the power of the Celestial Master Mansion to you after so many years? Zhang Daoling lowered his head and said, I did not do well enough. I did not meet your expectations. The old Celestial Master shook his head. No, you're very outstanding, but you're too outstanding. I'm not handing over the authority of the Celestial Master's mansion to you because you're not shameless enough. Zhang Daoling looked up at the old Celestial Master in shock. The old Celestial Master said, In the martial world, if you don't take advantage of others, you'll be at a disadvantage. You want to save face so you can't go too far. If you don't suffer, who will? Other people would only talk about face after getting the benefits, but you, on the other hand, didn't even see the shadow of the benefits and you're already talking about face. I've lived for 500 years. I've seen Taoism, Buddhism, Taoism, and I've seen all the major forces in the world. I was there when diabolism was glorious. I was there when Taoism was glorious. I was there when Buddhism was glorious. I don't care if it's good, evil, Taoism, or fiend. Remember, you're just a member of the Celestial Master Mansion. The reason why the elders impart their knowledge and answer their doubts is because they want to see their descendants grow up safely. As he spoke, the old Celestial Master patted Zhang Qingzhen's shoulder. Looking at Zhang Daoling, the old Celestial Master said in a deep voice, "When you realize that in your heart, the safety of the sect is more important than anything else, more important than your so-called reputation, more important than your own face, then I can rest assured and truly hand over this position to you." Zhang Daoling nodded and left, deep in thought. After Zhang Daoling left, Zhang Qingzhen suddenly said, "Father, he's also thinking about the Celestial Master Mansion." The old Celestial Master turned his head and looked at Zhang Qingzhen with a faint smile. "You finally know how to care about your old man at a time like this? Don't worry, of course I know he's thinking about the Celestial Master Mansion. But Zhang Daoling still needs more training." Zhang Qingzhen suddenly asked, "Then how did the previous generation Celestial Master train you, old Celestial Master?" The old Celestial Master was stunned and smiled. "I didn't need to train. Because in that era, whether you wanted your life or your face was a very good choice." After walking out of the Celestial Master Mansion, Chu Xiu looked back at Dragon Tiger Mountain. Only now did he understand why the Celestial Master Mansion could still be the leader of Taoism even though it did not have the deep foundation and long history of the Chunyang Dao sect, and did not have a stunning figure like Ning Xuanji from the real martial sect. The old Celestial Master was famous in the pugilistic world. He could see more clearly and further than anyone else. Some people lived for hundreds of years, but it was just a waste of time. But the old Celestial Master really lived and understood. As long as he was there, the Celestial Master Mansion might not be able to be the supreme in the world, but at least they would never fall behind and would not have to worry about the extinction of their inheritance. After leaving the Celestial Master Mansion, Chu Xiu still had to go to the moon-worshipping cult. There was a conflict of interest between the Bright Devil and the Hidden Devil. When the Hidden Devil lineage was weak, both sides were suppressed by the righteous martial arts world. In fact, they could still join forces. But now Chu Xiu led the Hidden Devil lineage back to Kunlun and established the Devil cult. In the eyes of others, this was against the moon-worshipping cult. It was impossible for the two sides to join forces. But in fact, Chu Xiu was confident that he could persuade Yi Shaonan to help. The reason was very simple. It was because the master of the moon-worshipping cult was Yi Shaonan. When the moon-worshipping cult heard the news that Chu Xiu had come to see them, almost everyone was stunned. Chu Xiu was now in the limelight in the pugilistic world. At the same time, he had attracted the fear of countless righteous forces. They were even preparing to attack West Kunlun. What was he doing here? Now that Chu Xiu's identity was here, Eastern Emperor Tai, the high priest of the moon-worshipping cult, and the holy maiden of the moon-worshipping cult welcomed Chu Xiu together. The holy maiden of the moon-worshipping cult teased, "Great cult master Chu, how does it feel to be the cult master of the devil cult?" Chu Xiu said indifferently, "I can hear a hint of ridicule in your tone. Although I now occupy the Kunlun devil cult, I guess most of the people in the pugilistic world, even the people of the devil path, do not think that I am the cult master of the devil cult. I am only the master of the Kunlun devil cult. Only the name of Lord Duguweiwei is worthy of this title." Eastern Emperor Tai and the high priest of the moon-worshipping cult looked at Chu Xiu in surprise. This Chu Xiu actually knew what he was doing. But since he knew this, he still dared to occupy the Kunlun devil cult and call himself the devil master. Weren't you afraid that Duguweiwei would cause trouble for you after he reincarnated? Right now, the relationship between the two sides was a bit delicate, so only the holy maiden of the moon-worshipping cult would say such teasing words without any scruples. Eastern Emperor Tai and the high priest of the moon-worshipping cult looked serious. After seeing Yi Shaonan, Chu Xiu subconsciously narrowed his eyes. Last time in the primitive devil cave, Yi Shaonan had obtained the demon seed. Now it seemed that even if he had not completely refined the demon seed, he had almost refined it. At this time, the aura around Yi Shaonan had become indescribable, because Chu Xiu could not even feel Yi Shaonan's existence. Yi Shaonan was clearly standing there, but as long as Chu Xiu closed his eyes, he wouldn't be able to sense that there was someone in front of him. However, he could sense a terrifying existence that was as dazzling as the bright moon in the sky. Seeing that Chu Xiu had come looking for him, Yi Shaonan just said lightly, "What's the matter?" This was Yi Shaonan's style, so Chu Xiu said directly, "The righteous path of martial arts is preparing to join forces to flatten Kunlun. I want to ask the moon-worshipping cult and sect Master Yi to help." As soon as this was said, Eastern Emperor Tai said directly, "Impossible." Although Eastern Emperor Tai appreciated Chu Xiu very much, and they had worked together many times before, he would never choose to stand on Chu Xiu's side this time. From the moment Chu Xiu chose to occupy the Kunlun mountain and rebuild the Kunlun devil cult, the relationship between the moon-worshipping cult and Chu Xiu had become antagonistic. For the moon-worshipping cult, the threat of Chu Xiu was even equal to that of the righteous path of martial arts. The high priest of the moon-worshipping cult sneered and said, "Official Chu has a shrewd plan. It was you who caused the righteous path of martial arts to besiege you in a high-profile manner, but now you have dragged the moon-worshipping cult into the water. What can we get if the moon-worshipping cult makes a move? In the end, it's all for naught. In the end, the one who benefits is you, Chu Xiu." Chu Xiu asked the high priest of the moon-worshipping cult, "May I ask the high priest, who is stronger between the moon-worshipping cult and the Kunlun devil cult now? Who will be stronger and who will be weaker in the future?" The high priest of the moon-worshipping cult said proudly, "Of course the moon-worshipping cult is stronger. The cult master alone can fight against the strongest in the world." Dong Huang Tai curled his lips disdainfully. Previously, the high priest of the moon-worshipping cult always said that he was flattering the cult master. Now, aren't you also flattering him? However, when it came to the future, the high priest of the moon-worshipping cult paused. He really didn't dare to say the future because how long had it been since Chu Xiu rose to power? Even if Yi Shaonan was present and the moon-worshipping cult was strong, who could say for sure in the future? After all, the speed of Chu Xiu's rise was too terrifying. However, the high priest of the moon-worshipping cult still said stubbornly, "Even in the future, with the current situation of the moon-worshipping cult, we will definitely not be weak." Chu Xiu spread his hands and said, "Since the high priest is so confident in the future of the moon-worshipping cult, why are you afraid to help me? You should know that the Kunlun devil cult is now a thorn in the side of the righteous path. If they can't find the reincarnation of the cult master, they will turn their attention to me. Isn't it a good thing for the moon-worshipping cult to be able to attract the attention of all the righteous sects? Why are you resisting, high priest?" The high priest of the moon-worshipping cult was speechless. When it came to sharp-tongued, he, who only knew how to study Gu curse techniques in the moon-worshipping cult, was really not as good as Chu Xiu, who was always arguing with people. Just when Dong Huang Tai wanted to say something more, Chu Xiu looked at Yi Shaonan and said, "Actually, after saying so much, the moon-worshipping cult has no reason to make a move. However, I have something here that I think Cult Master Yi will be very interested in. I killed another divine general of Elysium. I am afraid that Jun Wuxian will also make a move. Cult Master Yi, are you interested in watching?" Chapter 1061. The fact that Chu Xiu had killed Divine Lord Luo was only known to some people within the Kunlun devil cult. The outside world did not know, but Dong Huang Tai also knew that Chu Xiu would not lie to them about this kind of thing. But after just hearing the news, they still could not help but be shocked. What did he mean by killing another Elysium divine general? Chu Xiu's tone was as if he was saying that he had killed a cat or a dog, which made people extremely uncomfortable. But what was more surprising was Yi Shaonan. Hearing the news that Chu Xiu said that Jun Wuxian would also go, Yi Shaonan only thought for less than 3 breaths of time, then nodded and said, "Yes, I will go." Dong Huang Tai and the high priest of the moon-worshipping cult still wanted to say something, but Yi Xiaonan waved his hand and stopped them. This made both of them speechless. The decision made by the cult leader was obviously not something they could stop. Chu Xiu smiled and said, "In that case, I will wait for cult leader Ye's arrival at Kunlun Mountain." After saying that, Chu Xiu left directly, leaving behind Dong Huangtai and the others with a helpless look. In fact, when they heard Chu Xiu say the name Jun Wuxian, Dong Huangtai and the others already knew that they could not stop Yi Xiaonan. Yi Xiaonan, the famous great demon of Jianghu, was actually very pure. At least in terms of his attitude towards martial arts, he was purer than anyone else. According to Chu Xiu's analysis, Yi Xiaonan should have almost reached the peak of the mysterious realm of heaven and earth. He was not inferior to even the 4 great demon lords of the past, and might even be stronger than them. For the current Yi Xiaonan, he estimated that he would also try to break through the mysterious realm above the mysterious realm of heaven and earth. Now in Jianghu, there were only 2 people who had reached this realm. One was Zhong Shenxiu, and the other was Jun Wuxian. If Jun Wuxian made a move again, Yi Xiaonan would definitely be interested. Even Chu Xiu suspected that if Yi Xiaonan was really stuck at this juncture and encountered a bottleneck that could not be broken through, would he go to West Kunlun to find Jun Wuxian to exchange pointers? At this time, on the side of the Righteous Alliance, when Chu Xiu had returned to Kunlun Mountain, they had finished assembling and were ready to go to Kunlun to destroy the devil cult. Northern Yan, Western Chu, and Eastern Qi. Almost all of the righteous warriors of these 3 places had gathered. Even those who had not wanted to come before were forced to come by the general trend. Taoist Master Fu was, who had the Taoist warriors of Yan Tian, Hu, and Taoist sect warriors of Qi and Zhou and Kingdom, and had the sect warriors of Jianghu. Almost all the elites of the righteous path in the Jianghu, numbering more than 100,000 people, were gathered at the foot of Mount Kunlun. When warriors of this scale joined forces to attack, none of the 3 great countries could resist. The power was simply terrifying. But although their power was strong and there were many of them, when they stood at the foot of Kunlun Mountain, facing the mountain range that stretched for thousands of miles like a giant dragon, they could still feel how small they were. Looking at the empty dragon gate that Chu Xiu had abandoned, Ling Yunzi suddenly breathed a sigh of relief. In the past, the ancestors of the Chunyang Dao sect, or rather, the ancestors of the entire righteous martial world, had crossed this pass and destroyed the Kunlun devil cult, in exchange for 500 years of peace in the martial world. Now, they had to walk the path that their ancestors had once walked, to deal with enemies as difficult as their ancestors. This was really like a reincarnation. Fate made fools of people. The people of the Taoist Master Mansion did not come? Ling Yunzi suddenly asked. Lu Changlu shook his head and said, there was no news from Zhang Daoling after he returned. Obviously, the Taoist Master Mansion did not plan to participate in this matter. Ling Yunzi sighed and said, the old Taoist Master is old and only wants to lead the Taoist Master Mansion to stay in Western Chu. He only cares about his own interests and does not care about the safety of the Righteous Alliance. Such behavior is a bit disappointing. Lu Changlu was a kind man. He smiled bitterly and said, it is not necessary. Everyone has their own fate. For so many years, the Taoist Master Mansion has been suppressing the moon-worshipping cult in Western Chu. Without the Taoist Master Mansion, the Central Plains warriors would not be able to resist the power of the moon-worshipping cult. Ling Yunzi waved his hand and said, okay, no need to say more. After this battle, the Jianghu will judge our reputation. Looking at the Kunlun mountain, Ling Yunzi shouted in a deep voice, climb the mountain. Kill the demon. The group of righteous sect's martial artists also followed and shouted, exterminate the demons. At the peak of the Kunlun mountain, Chu Xiu and the other warriors of the Yinma clan looked at the warriors who were climbing the mountain aggressively with boundless killing intent. A cold light flashed in their eyes. Lu Jiang stood beside Chu Xiu, but his thoughts had flown to who knows where. In the past, when the Kunlun devil cult was destroyed, Lu Jiang did not participate. At that time, he was still sealed in the blood soul bead. After he was resurrected, he learned some details of the destruction of the Kunlun devil cult through other channels, but not much. In the end, the Righteous Alliance won. Therefore, the various details of the battle were deliberately covered up. It seemed that they did not want others to know that the Kunlun devil cult was still strong without Dugu Weiwei, and that they had suffered heavy casualties and so on. Chu Xiu boy, are you confident? This time, just the number of heaven and earth profound understanding supreme experts alone will not be small. Chu Xiu narrowed his eyes and said, who dares to say that they are confident in facing this kind of power? Life and death, success or failure, all depends on the will of heaven. Why, are you afraid? Lu Jiang he curled his lips and said, why would I be afraid? Lu Jiang he was not afraid, but it did not mean that other people in the Kunlun devil cult were not afraid. The Kunlun devil cult now had tens of thousands of disciples. Half of them were the elite disciples of the Jianghu Hall and the Yinma clan under Chu Xiu, and the other half joined later. Among these people, there were devil path warriors, rogue cultivators, and some aristocratic families' disciples who were thrown in by their elders. They had not followed Chu Xiu on expeditions and dealt with all kinds of difficulties. Therefore, at this time, they were naturally very hesitant. Chu Xiu did not care about these warriors. They were not the protagonists of this battle. They might not even have the chance to make a move. As long as they could survive this time, even if they did not make a move, there would be enough changes in their mentality. Looking down, the warriors of the righteous sects almost occupied the entire mountain road. They were like a long dragon, completely blocking the only way out of the Kunlun mountain. Originally, the Kunlun mountain still had a mountain gate like the Dragon Gate as a pass. However, Chu Xiu directly abandoned it and directly faced the enemy at the peak of the Kunlun mountain. The Dragon Gate had been completely destroyed. Although it was rebuilt, it was only for show. On the Kunlun mountain, Chu Xiu let Master Yuan Ji and other spell formation masters of the Kunlun devil cult take action together. They rearranged the formation according to the formation left behind by the heaven-weeping demon Venerable. Although it was not at the level of the Kunlun devil cult in the past, it was still barely usable. With the fierce shouts of, "Exterminate the demon," teams of righteous martial artists climbed the mountain peak one by one. The pressure even caused the wind and clouds to roar and roll angrily on the entire Kunlun mountain. The momentum rushed to the sky, causing the newcomers of the Kunlun devil cult who had not experienced the flames of war to turn pale. Looking at the people present, Chu Xiu walked out and laughed. "Everyone, are you here to congratulate the sacred cult's reconstruction? There are quite a lot of people here, but fortunately, the Kunlun mountain is big enough to accommodate all of you. However, where's the congratulatory gift?" In the face of this level of power, Chu Xiu could still laugh. There was not even a trace of seriousness on his face. Although the people present were enemies with Chu Xiu, they had to admit that Chu Xiu was really a character. Ling Yunzi said in a deep voice, "Congratulatory gift? The congratulatory gift is the sword in our hands. Chu Xiu, from the day you came to Kunlun, you should have expected this day. However, you didn't expect this day to come so soon, did you?" Chu Xiu shook his head. "Taoist Ling Yunzi is a monk. Is it appropriate for you to shout about killing?" A sharp look appeared in Ling Yunzi's eyes. Taoism suppresses demons and exterminates evil. It can be considered as accumulating merit. Su Ci of the Great Light Temple stood out and chanted the name of Buddha. Buddhism also has the wrath of the Vajra subduing demons and the fire of Wisdom King to suppress evil. The elder ancestor of the Ying clan of Shangshui, Ying Si, shook his head. "Chu Xiu, with your talent, your future is limitless. Unfortunately, you made a wrong choice. It is not easy to enter the Kunlun devil cult. You may come, but you may not be able to sit firmly. What a pity." Originally, with the Ying clan style, they would not intervene in this kind of thing. However, as the elder ancestor of the Ying clan said, Kunlun Mountain was very important. No one was willing to see the devil's prestige return to the martial world, including the Ying clan of Shangshui who had always maintained a neutral position. On the side of the Subodhi monastery, the first to stand out was not Rama, but an unfamiliar old monk. Seeing Rama standing respectfully behind him, the martial artists of the other righteous sects were stunned because even they did not recognize this old monk. When Lu Jianghe saw the old monk, he was shocked and shouted, "Old bald donkey Bukong! You are actually still alive." Chu Xiu looked at Lu Jianghe and said, "He is a person from 500 years ago? How is his strength?" Lu Jianghe nodded and quickly said, 500 years ago, he was a heaven and earth Tong Xian realm martial artist from the Sabodhi monastery. To be more accurate, he should be the strongest among the ascetics of that generation, undying godly monk, Bukong monk. This old bald donkey's strength is a little hard to say, but he is extremely difficult to deal with. Let me put it this way, he once fought with the heartless demon Venerable. He is one of the few who can survive under the hands of the heartless demon Venerable. The heartless demon Venerable's attacks are extremely crazy. It is either you die or I die. He is not the strongest among the 4 demon Venerables, but he is the one that all martial artists do not want to face. This old monk can survive under the hands of the heartless demon Venerable. You can imagine how strong he is. That's right. This bald donkey seems to have cultivated the Sabodhi monastery's undying meditation. He actually managed to cultivate this kind of thing successfully. His dog shit luck is really good. At this moment, the monk Bukong also looked towards Chu Xiu and the others. The gaze he used to look at Chu Xiu carried a trace of strangeness. That's because there was a familiar feeling coming from Chu Xiu's body. However, he could not recall what it was. 500 years of undying meditation, it was equivalent to him sleeping for 500 years. Although his life force had recovered, it was inevitable that his primordial spirit would suffer some damage, causing him to forget some details and other things. Chapter 1062. Bukong monk looked at Chu Xiu and felt that he was very familiar, but he did not pay much attention to it. He already knew that Chu Xiu had obtained a part of the Kunlun devil cult's inheritance, and he even had a part of Dugu Weiwei's demonic arts. Maybe something on him was left behind by an old friend, so it was normal for him to feel that it was familiar. Therefore, Bukong monk was only slightly puzzled for a moment before he turned to look at Lu Jianghe and said with a faint smile, "So it's the Blood Demon Hall's hall leader Lu. 500 years have passed, and I feel very gratified to be able to meet an old friend. I heard that back then, Hall Master Lu was imprisoned by Dugu Weiwa. But who would have thought that after 500 years, you would still choose to stand on the side of the Kunlun demon sect? Such loyalty is something that this old monk did not expect." Bukong monk's words were not only unbearable to Chu Xiu and the others, but even Lu Jianghe's face turned slightly red. Whether it was 500 years ago or 500 years later, this was the first time he heard someone use the word loyalty to evaluate him. Since you managed to escape 500 years ago, why do you insist on throwing your life away today? The person who suddenly stood up was an old man from the Storm Sword Mound. He was very old, and his whole body exuded a smell of decay. He held a long sword wrapped in an old ebony scabbard in his hand. He spoke slowly, coughing after every few words he uttered. But seeing this person, the expressions of Chu Wuji and the others suddenly changed. "Who is this?" Chu Wuji said with some shock. The previous leader of the Storm Sword Mound, Sword Venerable, Zhong Li Mu, who was ranked 9th on the sovereign list. Although this guy wasn't from that era 500 years ago, he was the personal disciple of the Storm Sword Mound's Sword Emperor, Xin Kangwu. According to age, he was already over 400 years old. Zhong Li Mu had already disappeared from the Jianghu more than 100 years ago. There was no news of his death from the Storm Sword Tomb, but everyone thought that he was dead. More than a decade ago, Wind Sweeping Tower removed him from the sovereign ranking and Windcloud's Sword Tomb didn't say a word. Who would have thought that this old man was still alive? Simply unreasonable. Although in theory, heaven and earth mysterious realm could also live for more than 400 years, how many people in Jianghu could truly live to this age? Because Zen Master Bukong cultivated the undying Zen, he was the same as Lu Jianghe who had his primordial spirit sealed. He was not truly alive, so his lifespan was still the same as a normal martial artist's. In the entire Jianghu, only the old Celestial Master from the Celestial Master's mansion had lived the longest. He had even lived so long that he had surpassed the limits of the mysterious realm of heaven and earth. For Zhong Li Mu to be able to live until now, it was as if he was the second old celestial master. Lu Jianghu also said in a low voice, "This old man is not easy to deal with. His master is Shin Kangwu. That guy was a troublesome person back then. His strength was completely on par with the 4 great demon sovereigns, but he had been holding back and waiting for the sect master to die before he made a move. A disciple personally trained by Shin Kangwu is definitely not an ordinary person." Chu Xiu nodded. Of course, he knew that the other party was not an ordinary person. It should be said that as long as one could step into the heaven and earth mysterious realm, there was no ordinary person at all. Looking at the people present, Chu Xiu laughed and said, "A total of 6 heaven and earth mysterious realm powerhouses personally came to cause trouble for me. This treatment is simply better than Sect Master Ye's. All right, speaking of Sect Master Yi, he should have appeared now, right?" As Chu Xiu's voice fell, Yi Xiaonan's figure leaped from Mount Kunlun and just stood at the side, not saying a word. This battle had nothing to do with him. He was just waiting for Jun Wuxian, so in the entire moon-worshipping cult, except for him, no one else came. But the others did not know this. With Yi Xiaonan's character, he would not go and explain and so on. At this time, seeing Yi Xiaonan appear here, everyone was shocked. On Chu Xiu's side, there was only Shang Tianliang to support the facade, so they were not afraid. But at this time, with the addition of Yi Xiaonan, there was an additional variable. Everyone present, even the monk Bu Kong, who escaped from the hands of the heartless demon sovereign 500 years ago, when facing Yi Xiaonan, did not dare to say that he could win. At this time, Chu Xiu looked indifferent, but in his heart, he was a little anxious. Why was that person not here yet? If he did not come, there was no way to continue this show. Yi Xiaonan only came for Jun Wuxian. When it was really time to fight, he would not help. Chu Xiu took a deep breath, stood up, and said in a deep voice, 500 years ago, my sacred cult was destroyed in the hands of the righteous path of martial arts. The wheel of fortune has turned, and now it is our devil path's turn to rise again. When swords and weapons meet, it is a fight to the death. Why talk about those hypocritical principles? Ling Yunzi did not refute, but just nodded and said, if you say so, it is true. Between the righteous path and the devil path, only swords and weapons are left. 500 years ago, our ancestors were able to destroy the Kunlun devil cult once, and now we can still do it. As Ling Yunzi's voice fell, he wanted everyone to attack together and directly attack the Kunlun devil cult. Although Yi Xiaonan was strong, with so many people attacking together, it would be fine as long as they could delay Yi Xiaonan. With so many big sects of the righteous path joining forces, it was enough to destroy the Kunlun devil cult that had not yet grown up. But at this moment, Chu Xiu suddenly said, Taoist Ling Yunzi, the attack on my sacred cult this time should be caused by your Chunyang Dao sect again, right? All these years, I've killed quite a number of people from your pure Yang Dao sect. However, Taoist Ling Yunzi, do you still remember when I, Chu Xiu, was the one who initiated all these intense battles? Ling Yunzi said faintly, eliminating demons and defending the righteous path, the few comrades of my Chunyang Dao sect died a worthy death. Although Ling Yunzi said so, he still felt some heartache in his heart. Compared to other warriors of Chunyang Dao sect who had a radical character, Ling Yunzi was more clear-headed. Back then, when Chu Xiu was not so powerful, their Chunyang Dao sect was also in a period of decline, so there was no need to fight to the death with Chu Xiu. If Zhen Yangzi and the others could be more rational back then and not fight with Chu Xiu head-on, then now, with the power of many sects of the righteous path, they could completely get rid of Chu Xiu with the least loss. In the end, the head of the 2 generations of the 6 guardians of the Chunyang Dao sect died in the hands of Chu Xiu, and the rest of the disciples of the Chunyang Dao sect also died in the hands of Chu Xiu, which could be said to be a heavy loss. In the end, these people could be said to have died in vain. Chu Xiu laughed and said, what a worthy death. The righteous path and devil path are on opposite sides, but your Chunyang Dao sect and I have a personal grudge. Leader Ling Yunzi, you and I have fought more than once or twice in the past. This time, in front of everyone, you and I will fight again. Do you dare or not? Seeing that Chu Xiu actually dared to challenge Ling Yunzi openly, Everyone present had a strange look on their faces. Chu Xiu and Ling Yunzi had fought many times, but those times could be said to be forced to fight. But this time, he actually used the cultivation of the true fire spirit refinement realm to challenge the supreme expert of the mysterious heaven and earth realm in public. This kind of thing was extremely rare in the Jianghu. It should be said that there were not many of them. Was Chu Xiu prepared to struggle for glory before he died? If it were someone else, they would definitely not agree at this critical moment. Whether it was the righteous path or devil path, at this critical moment of life and death, the so-called fair one-on-one fight was simply a joke. Moreover, to deal with this group of people from the devil path, was there any need for fairness? Everyone should fight side by side. Getting rid of the devil path was the right thing to do. However, the person that Chu Xiu challenged was Ling Yunzi. Ling Yunzi only hesitated for a moment, and he directly said coldly, "Then let's fight. I will let you accept your defeat wholeheartedly." For Ling Yunzi to be able to become an ultimate expert in the profound understanding of heaven and earth, even if his mental state could not be said to be strong, it was not weak either. However, it could be said that Ling Yunzi was truly obsessed with Chu Xiu. When he was in the true fire spirit refinement realm, Ling Yunzi could not defeat Chu Xiu. When he reached the mysterious heaven and earth realm, he still could not defeat him. The most important thing was that these two battles were not because he was defeated by Chu Xiu, but because of external factors, he had to withdraw. Of course, the people in the Jianghu would not care about the hidden reasons. They were all discussing that Ling Yunzi was the weakest expert of the mysterious heaven and earth realm and so on. Even if Ling Yunzi did not care about some of the voices in the outside world, he could not stand being discussed and slandered every day. One could imagine how sullen his mood was. Now that Chu Xiu had issued a challenge in front of everyone, he had no reason to refuse. Chu Xiu was already a turtle in a jar. At present, almost all the righteous sects in the Jianghu had gathered in the Kunlun mountain and directly suppressed him with force. He did not believe that Chu Xiu could still play any tricks. Without external forces to interfere with him, this time he wanted to show others whether he could defeat Chu Xiu. Of course, if others were to know Ling Yunzi's thoughts, they would probably feel sad for him. No matter what, Ling Yunzi was an ultimate powerhouse in the Elysium of heaven and earth realm. He actually had to rely on defeating Chu Xiu, a martial art practitioner in the true fire spiritual refinement realm, to prove his strength. One could imagine how sullen he was. When the others saw this scene, they could not help but frown, obviously a little dissatisfied. At this time, there was no need to play a one-on-one challenge. The most important thing was to directly deal with Chu Xiu and break through the Kunlun devil cult. Playing this kind of game would only be a waste of time. But now that Ling Yunzi had agreed, it was not good for them to say anything. Among the experts of the mysterious heaven and earth realm present, Ling Yunzi was not the strongest. He might be the weakest. But after all, this matter was initiated by him. Taoism had a great say in the alliance of the righteous sects. Therefore, although they were dissatisfied, it was not good for them to refute at this time. Anyway, it would only be a little bit of time. Chu Xiu clenched the devil's saber in his hand and let out a long breath. At present, he could only delay the time like this. If that person still did not come, he could only use his trump card in advance. Chapter 1063. The difference between the Elysium of heaven and earth and the spiritual cultivation with true fire was like the difference between heaven and man. Ling Yunzi had fought with Chu Xiu more than once or twice. He had to admit that Chu Xiu's power was indeed extremely powerful. Cultivating both the spiritual cultivation with true fire and the physical cultivation with true fire at the same time, Chu Xiu's current state was almost the most perfect state for a martial artist. His heart and mind were one, his chi and body were one, and his spirit and heaven were one. An extremely powerful physical body and a power foundation that had developed to the peak among those in the same realm allowed Chu Xiu to fight with those in the Elysium of heaven and earth. However, no matter how powerful a person was, there was still a limit. When faced with a powerhouse in the Elysium of heaven and earth who controlled the world, no matter how strong Chu Xiu was, he could only be stronger than the person, not the world. This time, Ling Yunzi did not use his pure yang divine weapon, even though Shi Yunzi had come with him. If he still used Ancestor Lu's divine weapon to deal with Chu Xiu, a martial artist in the spiritual cultivation with true fire, then even if he won this battle, he would probably continue to be laughed at by the people of the pugilistic world. Chu Xiu happened to notice this as well. He smiled and said, "Sect leader Ling Yunzi, don't you need to change your weapon?" Ling Yunzi said indifferently, "I don't need to change my weapon to deal with you." Chu Xiu clenched the broken formation in his hand and said, "Sect leader Ling Yunzi, you don't need to change your weapon, but I have a new demon blade now. Sect leader will be my first opponent to test it. Today, I'll see if this demon blade of mine is sharp or not." As soon as Chu Xiu finished speaking, he had already made the first move. A hint of coldness appeared on Ling Yunzi's face. Although the long sword in his hand was not Ancestor Lu's divine weapon, it was also a pure yang divine sword passed down through the generations of Chunyang Dao sect. The sword light was unsheathed. In an instant, everything in the sky and on the ground was enveloped by the pure sunlight. Even though the peak of Mount Kunlun was extremely large, the scorching pure yang radiance still enveloped an area of nearly 10 miles. The powerful qi activity was like a scorching sun traversing across the sky, transforming into a domain that completely enveloped Chu Xiu. Tens of thousands of sword lights fell with incomparably terrifying might. When the other Elysium of Heaven and Earth's supreme powerhouses saw Ling Yunzi attack, they all nodded subtly. To be honest, Ling Yunzi was not as bad as the outside world made him out to be. Although he had just advanced to the profound understanding of heaven and earth, he had accumulated an extremely deep foundation in the true fire spirit refinement realm. Although he had the cultivation, the heaven and earth supreme powerhouses divine, and had light, the demon's gang, and spirit with realm, and the earth, and the god, had, and the earth, and the demon and realm, and demon, and when one reached the mysterious realm of heaven and earth, it was extremely difficult to advance further. This included Rama, who was the youngest among them. Although he was talented and unparalleled, it was almost impossible for him to advance by leaps and bounds in this realm. He had to be like other warriors of the same rank and use time to accumulate his strength. Being in the Elysium of heaven and earth, it was extremely difficult to advance further. This included Rama, who was the youngest among them. Although his talent was unparalleled, it was almost impossible for him to advance by leaps and bounds in this realm. He had to be like other warriors of the same level and use time to accumulate his strength. Ling Yunzi had used his full strength right from the start, and it was obvious exactly how deep his desire to defeat Chu Xiu was. Chu Xiu's blade slashed down, and the long and narrow blade of the breaking formation trembled slightly. Although it was a demon blade, there was not much demon qi surrounding it. It did not look like a demon weapon at all. However, as the breaking formation slashed down, Chu Xiu directly used the Misty Slash's blade momentum to slash out. In an instant, the world seemed to freeze. Ling Yunzi's expression did not change, but the sword momentum in his hand became even more ferocious. He naturally recognized Dugu Weiwei's misty red dust slash in the past. Many experts had died under this slash. However, when Chu Xiu used it, it was useless. The misty slash could confine a space, but it could not confine this part of the world. This was because this was Ling Yunzi's domain, and only he could completely control it. However, at this moment, an unexpected scene happened. Wherever Chu Xiu's blade passed, the entire pure yang domain seemed to be torn open, and an endless amount of pure yang power leaked out. The sword radiance scattered, and the misty slash fell. The two collided, and suddenly, a powerful qi movement exploded. The explosive gang qi scattered in all directions, and even formed a huge vortex in midair, stirring up the wind and clouds. It was not surprising that Chu Xiu had blocked Ling Yunzi's move. If he did not have this bit of power, Chu Xiu would not have dared to challenge Ling Yunzi. However, what was shocking was that he had actually cut open Ling Yunzi's domain. Although the Elysium of Heaven and Earth claimed to be able to control heaven and earth, true control of heaven and earth was something that only immortals could do. The heaven and earth controlled by the Elysium of Heaven and Earth, to be precise, was the world within one's own domain. Throughout history, when existences in the Elysium of heaven and earth fought, it was extremely difficult to break the other party's domain. The simplest way was to use the domain against the domain and forcibly break it. However, only the heavens knew what method Chu Xiu had used. To think that he had managed to slash out a crack in Ling Yunzi's domain with a single slash, allowing the external powers of the heavens and earth to gush in. In an instant, the pure yang radiance dissipated and the domain shattered. Ling Yunzi looked at Chu Xiu in front of him in disbelief. He could actually cut open his domain? For the ultimate powerhouses in the Elysium of heaven and earth, the domain was only a symbolic means after they had advanced to this realm. Even without the domain, they were still the ultimate powerhouses in the Elysium of heaven and earth. Even when fighting with warriors of the same level, the ultimate powerhouses in the Elysium of heaven and earth rarely used their domains. You have a domain, and I also have a domain. When two people used their domains to collide, it was equivalent to a simple wrestling between low-level warriors. There was no technical content, and it was very boring. However, when facing a warrior of a lower realm than oneself, the existence of the domain could completely suppress the existence of the domain. This was also Chu Xiu. If it were anyone else, when facing the domain of the Elysium of heaven and earth, all power would be directly sealed, so that one could not even borrow a bit of the heaven and earth power. While Ling Yunzi was stunned, Chu Xiu's figure had already rushed towards Ling Yunzi. The powerful qi movement seemed to be able to tear the sky and earth apart. As the blade fell, everything in front of him was accurately cut into two. In the eyes of the other powerhouses, it seemed that the whole world had been divided into three parts. The heaven and earth on the left, the heaven and earth on the right, and Chu Xiu's blade. The blade intent of the breaking word formula was executed. Together with the incomparable sharpness of the breaking formation, it went straight for Ling Yunzi. The might was enough to make the Elysium of heaven and earth take it seriously. At this moment, the Bukong monk suddenly said, "His blade is very familiar. Duga Weiwei used it before." Everyone present was instantly shocked. The Ying family patriarch asked, "Did Chu Xiu obtain Duga Weiwei's demonic blade, listen to the spring rain?" However, after saying this, the Ying family patriarch felt that something was wrong. Although none of them had seen what the demonic blade, listen to the spring rain, looked like, they still had a description of it. It was definitely not like Chu Xiu's blade. The Bukong monk said, "It's not listen to the spring rain. I am referring to the aura of his blade. It is exactly the same as listen to the spring rain. These two blades are existences from the same source. They are supreme demonic weapons. Once they appear, they will drink blood and slaughter the common people." Luo Mo, who was at the side, said, "Don't worry, Reverend. This time, the demonic blade will not have the chance to drink blood." The Bukong monk sighed and said, "I hope so." After cultivating the undying Zen, although he had reconstructed his body, his primordial spirit and spirit were still slightly damaged. They were a little sluggish. In the past, his spiritual perception was very sensitive. However, it was now a little sluggish. He could sense that something was amiss, but he couldn't pinpoint what it was. At this moment, Ling Yunzi looked at the blade that Chu Xiu slashed at him. A trace of cold light flashed in his eyes. At this moment, he also discovered the abnormality of the formation breaking technique. This blade could actually shatter the domain. However, it did not matter. Other than the domain, it was not as if he did not have other methods. The long sword pointed continuously. The scorching pure yang astral qi condensed in midair. It turned into the two words, pure yang, in midair. It was like a huge rune that smashed down towards Chu Xiu. The two words, pure yang, were left behind by Ancestor Lu in the past. They contained the pure yang true meaning. The power of the demon-suppressing rune was almost at its peak. However, the saber intent of the break formula was too sharp to the extreme. Even if the talisman with the pure yang true meaning fell, it would still be cut in half when the saber intent of the break formula was displayed to the extreme. However, at this moment the word pure on the left and the word yang on the right exploded with scorching rays of pure sunlight at the same time. Within it, there was a faint sword aura blooming. However, the sword aura condensed into the shape of a sword silk. It was like a golden thread that wrapped around Chu Xiu's body. In an instant he was trapped in it, forming a huge golden cocoon. On the huge cocoon, the two words, Pure Yang, were vivid. The Pure Yang demon-suppressing rune was still successful. The sword venerable of the Windcloud Sword Tomb, Zhong Li Mu, said in a hoarse voice, condensing sword intent and entering the Pure Yang. Headmaster Ling Yunzi is not simple. His attainments in the Sword Dao and Pure Yang Dao connotation have reached the peak. In the Dao sect, his Dao connotation is unparalleled. He can be a headmaster. In the Sword sect, his Sword Dao is ever-changing. He can still be called a Sword Dao Grandmaster. He can split heaven and earth with his sword. For generations, the Chunyang Dao sect had used the sword as their weapon. However, the Dao sect was not a sword sect. For most of the disciples of the Chunyang Dao sect, they would always focus on cultivating the pure Yang Qi. As for the Sword Dao, it was just a cultivation method, a method. However, Ling Yunzi had also cultivated the Sword Dao to an extremely profound level. He could even get a person like Zhong Li Mu to personally praise him. One could imagine how strong his attainments in the Sword Dao were. The sword condensed the pure Yang energy. Just as Ling Yunzi was about to finish off Chu Xiu, a shrill cry that sounded like the roar of a ghost came from the sky. The heavens' cry blood rain fell and landed on the huge golden cocoon, melting it completely. What was revealed was Chu Xiu, who was wrapped in the world extinguishing fire and was surrounded by a monstrous demonic flame. In the next moment, a huge shadow of a demon crossed the sky. As if it was tearing the sky and earth apart, it grabbed at Ling Yunzi. Chapter 1064. As a supreme expert in the mysterious realm of heaven and earth, it was not a glorious thing to fight back and forth with Chu Xiu, a warrior in the true fire spiritual refinement realm. However, Ling Yunzi also had to admit that Chu Xiu's strength had basically reached the peak of the true fire spiritual cultivation realm. The power of a single powerful martial skill was already not much different from the existence of the heaven and earth mysterious realm. When Chu Xiu executed a legendary martial technique like the heaven and earth conquering demon lamenting heaven and crying great compassion mantra, its might was simply astonishing. Ling Yunzi formed a Dao seal with his hand. In the next moment, the Dao markings on his body flickered and condensed into a complicated talisman that went up against the gigantic demon god's shadow. One after another, runes shining with pure Yang energy blossomed, and finally engulfed the huge demon god phantom completely, directly sealing it. Chu Xiu frowned slightly. The gap between him and the mysterious realm of heaven and earth was not something that a saber could make up for. After all, the mystic inside of heaven and earth was still the mystic inside of heaven and earth. Even without a domain, it was still the mystic insight of heaven and earth. It was just that when Chu Xiu fought with Ling Yunzi in the past, he might have been forced to use the blood demon transformation technique to fight with his life on the line. But now, he didn't have to be in such a sorry state. However, the consumption of both sides was equal. Even the current Chu Xiu would find it hard to endure the continuous use of the breaking word formula saber intent and the heaven and earth conquering devil cries heaven great compassion mantra. On the other hand, Ling Yunzi did not need to risk his life. As long as he exerted his strength normally, he could completely exhaust Chu Xiu until he was exhausted. Chu Xiu's strength was indeed powerful, but no matter how powerful it was, it could not withstand such consumption. Ling Yunzi seemed to have noticed this as well. Therefore, his attacks became neither too fast nor too slow as he slowly controlled the rhythm. On the pure Yang sword in his hand, scorching rays of pure sunlight swallowed and spurted out, triggering the blazing sun Dao connotation as he slashed at Chu Xiu's sword. As long as Chu Xiu didn't use a powerful martial technique like the breaking formula, he would continue to waste time like this. Just like that, the two sides fought for a full 15 minutes. This was simply unimaginable in the eyes of others. Sometimes, the stronger the battle, the faster it would end. Fighting for 3 days and 3 nights was pure nonsense. A fight between experts did not allow for even the slightest mistake. Moreover, the strength and foundation of both of them were there for all to see. The victor and the loser would soon be known. Unless it was a fight between two martial artists with the same strength and combat experience, and neither of them was in a hurry and didn't want to risk their lives, then they would fight for 3 days and 3 nights. Ling Yunzi's brows were tightly knitted together as he attacked. He felt that something was wrong. This was not the first time he had fought with Chu Xiu. He knew that although Chu Xiu was young, his combat experience was incomparably rich. He should already know that he was prepared to exhaust his strength. He also knew that Chu Xiu had a secret technique. Although it would cost him a lot of energy, he would be able to unleash an extremely powerful force in an instant to fight for his life. Even he had to be careful when dealing with it. But now, Chu Xiu seemed to be playing along with his routine. He was so slow and probing with him, not in a hurry at all. Could it be that he only wanted to live a little longer? Although Ling Yunzi and Chu Xiu were enemies, he also had to admit that Chu Xiu was a very strong enemy, in all aspects. And he also had the qualities that all the big bosses of the Devil Path had. He was ruthless, patient, decisive, resourceful, and crazy. Chu Xiu was not afraid of death. On the contrary, if he was provoked, he would do crazy things. Now, Chu Xiu's behavior was very inconsistent with his character. And up until now, Chu Xiu was not in a hurry, but he was a little anxious. Some people from the righteous path were already discussing in a low voice, saying that he had not been able to take down Chu Xiu after such a long time. They were obviously here to exterminate the Devil Path, but in the end, they let the Devil Path Master show off his power here and so on. The person who spoke was naturally not from the Chunyang Dao sect, but he could not control the people from other sections. There was also a strong person behind him, but they did not care. Obviously, they were a little dissatisfied with Ling Yunzi's delay here. Gritting his teeth, Ling Yunzi had to use all his strength to rush forward again, ready to directly defeat Chu Xiu. He originally thought that this time, he could not consider external factors and defeat Chu Xiu openly. In the end, who would have thought that in the end, he was still affected by external factors? Chu Xiu also sighed. Ling Yunzi could not bear it anymore. It seemed that he could not delay for much longer. Chu Xiu subconsciously looked to the west. How could the people from Heavenly Gates be so calm? Both sides exchanged a few more fierce blows. The powerful force had even formed a huge cyclone on the peak of the entire Kunlun mountain. It was unknown when it would explode. At this moment, Ling Yunzi bit his finger and quickly drew a line of runes on the pure yang sword. The scorching blood seemed to ignite the pure yang sword. In an instant, the long sword pointed to the sky, attracting the wind and thunder of heaven and earth. The brilliance of the blazing sun was like a huge beam of light. It was received by Ling Yunzi in midair onto his long sword. The scorching power came from the blazing sun. Even the divine weapon in his hand could not withstand this power. The weapon's spirit let out a cry. As the sword slashed down, the scorching power had already enveloped the main peak of Kunlun Mountain. Within a radius of more than 10 miles, the power that was covered by ice and snow began to melt rapidly, causing an avalanche to crash down. At this moment, Chu Xiu did not use the blood demon transformation technique to risk his life. Instead, he turned around and the blade of the saber emitted endless apocalyptic flames. Like a spark setting a prairie ablaze, the saber slashed down. There was only a sliver of apocalyptic flames, but it ignited the entire mountain peak and completely enveloped Ling Yunzi. Domain. All the existences at the heaven and earth elemental illumination realm were shocked. Now, what Chu Xiu had cast was exactly the same as the heaven and earth elemental illumination realm's domain. The boundless flames of world devastation enveloped Ling Yunzi completely. The domain formed by the flames of world devastation cut off the connection between Ling Yunzi's supreme sword and the light of the sun, causing its power to no longer increase. There was a loud bang, and the power of the explosion in midair even distorted the void. The powerful storm forced the existences below the real fire spirit refinement realm to retreat hurriedly. Even the real Pellet State's Grandmaster couldn't resist this aftermath. The dazzling pure yang sword beam slashed apart the domain formed by the world annihilation fire. Although it was still very powerful, it was no longer the apocalyptic scene from before. The saber intent of the word break slashed out again, and the pure sunlight light was extinguished. Chu Xiu's figure retreated more than 100 meters. Ling Yunzi's figure didn't retreat, but the horrified expression on his face couldn't be concealed. His ultimate killer move was actually blocked by Chu Xiu, and it was even blocked in the form of a domain. How is this possible? Chu Xiu, who was blasted away on the opposite side, also breathed a sigh of relief. He was able to cause such power because Ling Yunzi himself was actually the most important. Breaking the formation could return all kinds of energy to its origin. Just now, when they were slowly exchanging blows, almost all of the energy that Ling Yunzi used was turned into extreme Yin energy by breaking the formation. However, Ling Yunzi didn't care. Shang Tianliang noticed the change in the power of breaking the array just now because he was familiar with Chu Xiu, and he had time to observe carefully. But Ling Yunzi was in a fierce battle. How could he think of such subtle things? Besides, this is Kunlun Mountain, the base camp of the demonic cult. Isn't it normal for the power of extreme Yin to be stronger and richer? As a result, he neglected that the subtle power of extreme Yin at the beginning had accumulated more and more in the process of their fight, and it was finally ignited by Chu Xiu directly with the apocalyptic flames, forming something similar to a domain. That was actually not a domain, but the power of extreme Yin was too strong. In that domain, apart from the power of extreme Yin, he couldn't absorb any other kind of power. Ling Yunzi looked at Chu Xiu, and a smile suddenly appeared at the corner of his mouth. Before this, I always thought that my state of mind was strong enough, but I lost to you twice, and in addition to the comments of others, it made my state of mind a little unbalanced. But now I understand that there are talented people in every generation, regardless of camp. You, Chu Xiu, are indeed a rare talent in the world. At the same age, I am not as good as you, and even if I give you some time, the current me is still not as good as you. My Chunyang Dao sect is your enemy, and it is normal to lose. If it were anyone else, they would also lose. Because of this kind of thing, it causes the state of mind to be unbalanced, which is very ridiculous. Back then, you destroyed my inner demon, allowing me to step into the mysterious realm of heaven and earth. And in this battle, you helped me to calm my state of mind. I already don't know whether to thank you or to kill you. Ling Yunzi understood and resolved the imbalance in his state of mind. Although this was not very helpful to his strength, it could make him more peaceful in the future cultivation. However, while Ling Yunzi had figured everything out, Chu Xiu was in trouble. Ling Yunzi said in a low voice, "This battle no longer has any meaning. Whether I win or lose, the outcome is the same. Chu Xiu, don't waste any more time. I won't ask you if you are going to surrender or resist to the end, because I know that you are not a person who will admit defeat and lower your head. After you die, I will leave a tomb for you in the back mountain of the Chunyang Dao sect, and I will return the karma of my advancement to the mysterious realm of heaven and earth to you after you die. Although you are an opponent worthy of respect." After Ling Yunzi's state of mind was clear, he became very magnanimous in doing things. His words also made some of the warriors present applaud repeatedly. Just as he was about to let the others attack together, an extremely terrifying aura came from the bottom of the Kunlun Mountain. The aura was so strong that it made the few mysterious realm existences at the scene tremble. Only Yi Shaonan looked up, but there was a touch of excitement in her eyes. Red hair and black robe with a towering aura. Jun Wuxian didn't walk up the mountain. Instead, he walked step by step in the air. Wherever he passed, the warriors would make way for him. They looked at Jun Wuxian as if they were looking at a real god. Seeing Jun Wuxian appear, Chu Xiu was relieved and said to Ling Yunzi with a smile, "Sect Master Ling Yunzi is generous, but I will not use the tomb for the time being. If you die in my hands in the future, I will also leave a tomb for you in the Kunlun Mountain." Chapter 1065. The appearance of Jun Wuxian here was not a surprise to anyone. Although Kunlun Mountain was big, it could not accommodate two sections. When Duga Weiwei was here, Kunlun only referred to the devil cult, and Elysium was almost slaughtered by Dugu Weiwei. With the destruction of the Kunlun devil cult, the east and west heavens slowly replaced the west Kunlun devil cult, and became known as the West Kunlun Elysium. So as long as Chu Xiu rebuilt the devil cult on Kunlun Mountain, the first to react should be Elysium. Even if Chu Xiu did not kill the god general of Elysium, Elysium would not allow such a thing to happen. So in the beginning, Ling Yunzi and the others did not react. In fact, they were also waiting for the people of Elysium to react. If Elysium could deal with Chu Xiu, that would be the best. They could then focus on finding clues about Dugu Weiwei's reincarnation. But who would have thought that after such a long time, the people of Elysium did not make a move, as if they had tacitly agreed to Chu Xiu rebuilding the devil cult, so they could only deal with Chu Xiu themselves. The battle had not even begun and Jun Wuxian had already arrived. Moreover, looking at the imposing manner that Jun Wuxian was exuding, it was obvious that he wanted to completely eradicate Chu Xiu's faction. Hence, Ling Yunzi and the others subconsciously retreated. If Jun Wuxian wanted to take action, they naturally wouldn't stop him. With Jun Wuxian taking action, their disciples could be sacrificed a little less. After all, Chu Xiu and his subordinates weren't weaklings. Most importantly, there was still Yi Xiaonan. At this time, Yi Xiaonan was also looking at Jun Wuxian, and his eyes revealed a hint of fighting spirit. Last time in the primitive demon cave, to be honest, although Yi Xiaonan saw Jun Wuxian and Zhong Shenxiu fight, he did not understand it. He could only say that he saw a part of it. Of course, this was better than the others because besides Yi Xiaonan, the others didn't even understand the slightest bit. After refining the congenital demon seed, Yi Xiaonan's strength and realm had improved a lot, even to the extent that Chu Xiu could not see through. At this time, Yi Xiaonan already had the qualifications to go one step further and pry into the realm of martial immortal that only legendary existences could reach. But the awkward thing was that Yi Xiaonan had no clue at all about this step. As for the realms above the mysterious opening of heaven and earth, as long as they were the peak sects from the ancient era, they would actually have records of them. Even the term martial immortal existed in a small portion of the ancient era's records. However, there were no detailed descriptions of the realms. So, no one knew if the two words martial immortal represented a realm, or if it was a title given when one's battle strength reached a certain limit. However, they were certain that those who were able to reach the martial immortal realm possessed battle power that ordinary profound understanding experts could not compare to. In the current Jianghu, everyone recognized that there were only two people who had reached this realm and completely surpassed the profound understanding of heaven and earth. One was Dugu Weiwei, and the other was Ning Xuanji. But after seeing Zhong Shenxiu and Jun Wuxian fight in the primitive demon cave, they had to add these two to the list. Although they didn't know if these two had reached the level of Dugu Weiwei and Ning Xuanji in the past, it was clear that they had surpassed the current profound understanding experts in the Jianghu by a large step. This person even included Yi Xiaonan. Yi Xiaonan also wanted to take the step, but he definitely didn't have any cultivation techniques or experience. He could only rely on himself to forcefully comprehend it. Also, it was to watch existences of this level fight, and even challenge them to accumulate experience in this realm. Last time in the primitive demon cave, when Zhong Shenxiu and Jun Wuxian fought, Yi Xiaonan could only understand a small part of it. But now, he was confident that he could understand a large part of it. This time, it was Chu Xiu who invited him. If Chu Xiu didn't say anything with Yi Xiaonan's character, he might even go to the gate of heaven to challenge Jun Wuxian. If he didn't have a heart that could die in peace, Yi Xiaonan wouldn't have been able to create the Heaven-Mending Heart Sutra, and he wouldn't have become the current #1 demonic cultivator. Jun Wuxian also felt the fighting spirit in Yi Xiaonan's eyes, but he didn't care. A lion wouldn't care about a wild cat's challenge, nor would he care about his ambition. Moreover, he came this time to kill Chu Xiu. Previously, Chu Xiu didn't know that Jun Wuxian was injured so badly last time, and he had been in seclusion. He was also wondering why the Gate of Heaven had not reacted, even when Divine Lord Luo was killed. In fact, Jun Wuxian's reaction was already very fast. When he came out of seclusion and learned that Divine Lord Luo had died in the hands of Chu Xiu, The first thing he did was to go to Eastern Kunlun to kill Chu Xiu. Staring at Chu Xiu, Jun Wuxian slowly said, "You are very lucky. Last time you killed Kuang Shiyue, I was blocked by Zhong Shenxiu. This time, you killed Divine Lord Luo, and I was in seclusion. But your luck is equally bad. Why did you provoke the Gate of Heaven? The Gate of Heaven divine generals aren't real gods and can be killed, but the person who killed the Gate of Heaven divine general can't live either." Lu Jianghu laughed and said, "What about the sect master?" Jun Wuxian suddenly looked over. In an instant, Lu Jianghu felt that the 6 paths of reincarnation in front of him were rotating and changing. In an instant, it was as if he was thrown into the 6 paths of reincarnation and went through a whole cycle. If it wasn't for the fact that he didn't collapse after being trapped for 500 years and that his willpower was strong enough to break free after experiencing a reincarnation, he would have been trapped in that endless reincarnation forever and become an idiot. But even so, Lu Jianghu's state of mind and primordial spirit were damaged in an instant. In an instant, he spat out a mouthful of blood, and his face turned pale. F***ck. What a loss. If he did not refine a true fire, even a spirit refinement realm expert would not be able to make up for the blood he spat out. Chu Wuji, Mei Qinglian, and those who were familiar with Lu Jianghu twitched their mouths. This bad habit of his mouth hadn't been cured even after 500 years. They felt that Lu Jianghu would die because of his mouth sooner or later. Lu Jianghu was also very helpless. The last time he saw Jun Wuxian attack, it was called magnificent. In the end, who would have thought that Jun Wuxian would even know primordial spirit's secret skills? Moreover, his attainments were simply beyond imagination, and he was seriously injured with just one look. Chu Xiu stood out and shook his head. To be precise, it should be the divine generals of Tianmen who had bad luck meeting me. Over the years, although the divine generals of Tianmen have died before, the number of them who died in the outside world can be counted on one hand. But they just had to meet me, and 2 of them died in a row. Shouldn't this be their bad luck? And Sect Master Jun, I feel that your luck is equally bad. Because as long as you meet me, you will meet the person you don't want to meet the most. Jun Wuxian was slightly stunned, but he didn't say anything. The 6 paths of reincarnation condensed behind him, and the shadow was distorting the space. It was as if the whole world was shrouded in his powerful aura. He wasn't good with words. Usually, he wouldn't say too much to the divine generals of Tianmen. If they were right, they would be rewarded. If they were wrong, they would be punished. It was that simple. Chu Xiu had killed 2 of his divine generals in a row. He was already dead. What's more, he dared to come back to Kunlun. Because of some kind of relationship, or some kind of fear, after Duga Weiwei disappeared, the Elysians didn't attack the Kunlun devil cult, even though they had a great enmity. Even during the 500 years since the destruction of the Kunlun devil cult, the people of the Elysians hadn't stepped into East Kunlun to occupy this place. But Chu Xiu had rebuilt the Kunlun devil cult, and this was still challenging the bottom line of the Elysians. He must be killed. The power of the 6 paths of Buddha disillusionment light will begin to show. Previously in the primitive demon cave, although Jun Wuxian had been defeated by Zhong Shenxiu, his 6 paths of Buddha disillusionment light will had left a deep impression on people. It was so powerful that it made people tremble. Everyone present thought that although Chu Xiu could fight Ling Yunzi to a standstill, he wouldn't be able to withstand a single move from Jun Wuxian. However, at this moment, a strange tremor suddenly came from the void. The calm void was like a piece of wrinkled cloth, torn from the middle. Zhong Shenxiu, dressed in white, stepped out from it and said habitually, "Excuse me," but after seeing Chu Xiu, Zhong Shenxiu swallowed the second half of his sentence and nodded as if he was very satisfied. Very accurate this time. Hearing Zhong Shenxiu's words, Chu Xiu almost broke out in a cold sweat. In the past, there were times when he was inaccurate. Zhong Shenxiu's existence was Chu Xiu's trump card. He owed Chu Xiu karma. This time, Chu Xiu dared to play so big because of Zhong Shenxiu's existence. It was difficult for a man to defeat the heavens, but Zhong Shenxiu's strength could undoubtedly defeat the heavens. He couldn't let Zhong Shenxiu kill Jun Wuxian, Su Ci and Luo Mo, because they had karma on them. Chu Xiu had to settle for the next best thing. As long as he protected himself this time, it wouldn't affect his karma, right? Unless there was a karma requirement, Chu Xiu had to die here today. Chu Xiu could only blame his bad luck. And now that Zhong Xinxiu had appeared, it proved that his plan had succeeded. But Zhong Xinxiu's last words still gave him a big fright. From the moment Jun Wuxian appeared, Chu Xiu had already triggered the mark left by Zhong Xinxiu in his mind to ask for help. Although Chu Xiu didn't know how Zhong Xinxiu could instantly appear in front of him from the East Sea, an existence at Zhong Xinxiu's level must have a way. It was just that Chu Xiu had forgotten that this person seemed to have a poor sense of direction. If he had come a few breaths later, perhaps Chu Xiu would have had to take on Jun Wuxian's 6 paths of Buddha disillusionment wheel. Previously, Chu Xiu was very calm in front of Jun Wuxian. But if he remembered that Zhong Xinxiu had a poor sense of direction, he probably wouldn't be able to remain calm either. Placing one's hopes on others was indeed very dangerous. This was Chu Xiu's first time, and it was likely that it would be the last time. Retreating, Chu Xiu gave the main stage to Zhong Xinxiu. The next main role would not be him, but the Mahasvara Heavenly Lord's turn to perform. Chapter 1066. In the past, Chu Xiu's plans would only start after he had great confidence. But this time, although Chu Xiu was also very confident, this confidence was under the premise that Zhong Xinxiu could act in time. Therefore, Chu Xiu said that placing all hope on others was a very dangerous thing. This was the first time, and it would also be the last time. Moreover, although Zhong Xinxiu owed Chu Xiu karma, he only owed Chu Xiu karma. He only had one chance, so he had to use this chance to move all of Chu Xiu's enemies and dangers in front of him. Then, by borrowing Zhong Xinxiu's power and influence, he could deal with them all at once. Only then could he be safe. At this time, when Jun Wuxian saw Zhong Xinxiu appear, his expression changed slightly. Chu Xiu could even see that the corner of his mouth was still twitching slightly. He now knew why Chu Xiu said that his luck was bad. Right now, he really did not want to see Zhong Xinxiu again. Last time in the primitive demon cave, Zhong Xinxiu had injured him, and he had just recovered from it. But as soon as he came out of seclusion, he encountered Zhong Xinxiu again. This luck was indeed not good. The expressions of the others present were even uglier than Jun Wuxian's. When Jun Wuxian appeared before, they were glad that Jun Wuxian had acted, saving them some energy. But in the blink of an eye, Zhong Xinxiu appeared again and stood on Chu Xiu's side. They could not imagine how Chu Xiu did it. The most mysterious powerhouse in the entire pugilistic world was the Sky Lord of Carefree Sky, Zhong Xinxiu. No one knew where Carefree Sky was, and no one was familiar with Zhong Xinxiu. Not counting those who asked for directions, the number of people who had even spoken to him could be counted on one hand. This existence suddenly appeared here and stood on Chu Xiu's side. It was simply incomprehensible. Monk Bukong looked at Zhong Xinxiu and Jun Wuxian with a trace of confusion. The protagonists 500 years ago were Dugu Weiwei and Ning Xuanji. Whether it was Elysium or Carefree Sky, they had no chance to appear. In this world, he thought that the number of experts had decreased by a lot. He didn't expect that these two existences would appear. Looking at Zhong Xinxiu, Jun Wuxian lowered his voice and shouted, "Zhong Xinxiu. This time, I didn't go out of the gate of heaven. Kunlun Gate of Heaven, this Kunlun mountain also belongs to my gate of heaven." Zhong Xinxiu nodded and said, "I know, but you still have to return to the gate of heaven. You can't kill him." "Why?" "Karma." Zhong Xinxiu succinctly spat out 2 words, but it almost drove Jun Wuxian crazy. "Karma? Karma again? What the hell is this karma that you want?" If the other Heaven's Gates warriors were to see Jun Wuxian's frenzied state, they would definitely be shocked beyond words. All along, when Jun Wuxian faced the other divine generals of the Elysium, he was always calm and even cold. The only person in the world who could make him lose his composure was probably Zhong Xinxiu. Zhong Xinxiu looked at Jun Wuxian with a strange gaze and said, "Karma is karma, what else can it be? Then today, what if I insist on killing him and breaking your karma?" The 6 paths of Buddha's disillusionary light destruction wheels behind Jun Wuxian spun faster and faster. The other existences who had not reached the true fire spirit refinement realm looked at it and felt dizzy. Zhong Shunxiu gently pointed in the void, like ripples on the surface of a calm lake. In an instant, the entire sky was covered by all kinds of powers. Earth, wind, water, fire, yin and yang, wind and thunder, all kinds of powers surged. The 6 paths of Buddha's disillusionary light destruction wheels behind Jun Wuxian, under the shock of all kinds of powers, instantly shattered. Zhong Shunxiu calmly said, "You know, you can't break it." Below, Yi Shaonan looked at the changing powers in the sky. The demonic aura in his eyes surged, and there was a trace of excitement. He knew that Chu Xiu had pulled him here to make use of his power, but with Zhong Shunxiu's move, it was worth it. At this time, not to mention Yi Shaonan, everyone present had been shocked by the power. Everyone was silent, but their hearts were in turmoil. Controlling heaven and earth? Their methods of controlling heaven and earth were simply a joke in front of Zhong Shunxiu. Jun Wuxian looked at Zhong Shunxiu in front of him, and then at the 6 paths of Buddha's disillusionary light destruction wheels behind him that had already shattered and dissipated. He was silent for a moment, then stepped into the void and turned to go down the mountain. Zhong Shunxiu's words were the truth. It was not arrogance, but mockery. With him around, he could not kill Chu Xiu. The distance between him and Zhong Shunxiu was always so big. Jun Wuxian did not understand Zhong Shunxiu, but he understood him better than other people in the pugilistic world. So he knew how stubborn Zhong Shunxiu was about karma. Since Chu Xiu had karma on him, as long as he wanted to kill Chu Xiu, he had to pass through Zhong Shunxiu first. However, Jun Wuxian had misunderstood. The karma that Zhong Shunxiu spoke of was only the karma of that one time, not the karma of eternity. After seeing Jun Wuxian dejectedly leave, whether it was Ling Yunzi or Su Si and the others, they were all silent. In the end, everyone waved their hands and led their people down Kunlun Mountain without saying a word. Chu Xiu's side did not stop them. After seeing Zhong Shunxiu's power that was so powerful that it made people despair, they knew that there was no way to fight this battle. Although they did not know what Zhong Shunxiu meant by karma, they could also see that Zhong Shunxiu had come here because of Chu Xiu and was on his side. How powerful was the Lord of Tianmen, Jun Wuxian? In the end, he was forced to retreat by Zhong Shunxiu. If that was the case, then what was the point of them staying here? Moreover, they were not confident because they did not know what Zhong Shunxiu's character was like, whether the other party was peaceful or bloodthirsty. Anyway, since the other party was standing on the side of the devil, Chu Xiu, it was estimated that he had nothing to do with the righteous path. If the other party was bloodthirsty and they made a move and angered the other party, who could stop Zhong Shunxiu? It was not a good feeling to come to the door aggressively, only to leave dejectedly. What was even worse was that Zhong Shunxiu was almost the strongest person in the world at this time. With Zhong Shunxiu's protection, who could touch Chu Xiu? Could it be that the heavens did not bless the righteous path martial arts world? First, there was the news of Dugu Weiwei's reincarnation, and then there was Chu Xiu's return to Kunlun and the establishment of a demonic cult. Could they only watch helplessly as the demonic path rose? In an instant, all the righteous sects had been overshadowed by a pessimistic mood. Seeing this scene, Chu Xiu breathed a sigh of relief. This situation was more perfect than he had imagined. Speaking of which, this time Chu Xiu had used Zhong Shunxiu's name to deceive Jun Wuxian and all the righteous sections. In fact, it was thanks to this person being Zhong Shunxiu that they believed him. If it were someone else, they would have gone to verify it, but it was because of Zhong Shunxiu's mysteriousness that they believed him. And Zhong Shunxiu himself was also very powerful. His habit of speaking was like this. He only cared about what he understood and did not care if others understood. The word, cause and effect, was very simple, but it gave people infinite imagination. No one could guess what it meant. Because of the unknown, there was fear. Yi Shaonan cupped his hands at Chu Xiu and turned to leave. This matter was undoubtedly very worthwhile for him. He only showed his face once and did not make a move, but he was able to observe an existence at the level of Zhong Shunxiu in action. For him, this was definitely a gain. At this time, at the foot of Kunlun, someone was also rejoicing. That person was Zhang Daoling. Zhang Daoling had been following the instructions of the old Taoist master. He did not go up the mountain, but waited at the foot of Kunlun to check the situation. If the Righteous Alliance won, it would not be too late to go up Dragon Tiger Mountain. In the beginning, he saw pure yang energy shining at the peak of Kunlun. He thought the fight had begun and waited to bring people up the mountain. Unexpectedly, there was a trembling aura coming from the mountain, which made him not dare to act rashly. When he could not resist his curiosity and wanted to go up the mountain to investigate, he saw the entire Righteous Alliance descend the mountain dejectedly, but there were no casualties. This made Zhang Daoling confused. He did not know what was going on and did not dare to ask. He could only bring people back to West Chu. But he was also very glad that this matter had nothing to do with his Taoist master's mansion. This storm swept the entire Jianghu, but it did not affect the Taoist master's mansion. At this time, on the mountain of Kunlun, Zhong Shenxiu looked at Chu Xiu and said, "Our karma is over." Chu Xiu nodded and said, "Thank you, Thong. Heavenly Master." Chu Xiu did not know how to address Zhong Shenxiu. It did not seem right to call him senior, so he could only call him Heavenly Master for the time being. After saying this, Zhong Shenxiu nodded gently and stepped into the air. In a few steps, he had disappeared from the peak of Kunlun. However, Chu Xiu seemed to find that Zhong Shenxiu did not go east, but south. He wanted to remind Zhong Shenxiu, but Zhong Shenxiu walked too fast and it was hard to say if he had other things to do, so Chu Xiu did not remind him. Looking at the people behind him, Chu Xiu said in a deep voice, "I said, the sacred fire will not be extinguished, the diabolism will exist forever. The righteous path has suppressed the diabolism for 500 years. Today's peak of Kunlun is not so easy to flatten." As Chu Xiu's voice fell, the disciples of the Kunlun devil cult, whether they were new or joined later, all cheered loudly. They could not be blamed for losing their composure. The pressure just now was too great. They were surrounded by so many experts of the righteous path, and there were even 6 existences in the heaven and earth mysterious realm. It was not easy for them to not lose their composure and beg for mercy on the spot. Who would have thought that they would grit their teeth and really survive? Their Kunlun devil cult did not lose a single soldier and actually forced the other party to retreat. Of course, it was not that Chu Xiu did not suffer any injuries. The only one who was injured was not Chu Xiu, who fought fiercely with Ling Yunzi, but Lu Jianghe, who vomited blood after being glared at by Jun Wuxian. Chapter 1067. The battle that the Kunlun devil cult had experienced could not be considered a battle. After all, only Chu Xiu had fought. But it was more cohesive to the entire Kunlun devil cult than a fierce battle. After all, the diabolism had been suppressed for 500 years. During these 500 years, the entire Jianghu was ruled by the righteous sects. Most of the diabolism warriors had been instilled with the feeling that they were inferior to the righteous sects. Even among the Inma clan, there were many people who thought that they were inferior to the righteous sects. Now, almost all the righteous sects in the Jianghu had joined forces to besiege Kunlun. In the end, they were still unable to take them down. This kind of confidence was extremely rare for them. Chu Xiu glanced at the pale Lu Jianghe and said to the others, "Take old Lu away and let divine Dr. Feng treat him." Speaking of which, Lu Jianghe had no one to blame but himself for his cheap mouth. Previously, Jun Wuxian's target was only Chu Xiu. He even ignored Yi Shaonan, who had the intention to fight. Naturally, he would not care about an ant like Lu Jianghe. But the destructive power of Lu Jianghe's mouth was not ordinary. He specially exposed the weakness of the Elysium and finally completely angered Jun Wuxian. He did not have the powerful primordial spirit cultivation like Chu Xiu. He had completely relied on his own willpower to break free from the power of the 6 paths of reincarnation. So this time, Lu Jianghe also, gloriously, became the only one under Chu Xiu who was injured. Although his injury was meaningless, Shang Tenliang sighed beside Chu Xiu and said, "There is always someone better. I'm afraid that the strength of these two has already touched the sky, right? As Lu Jianghu was being helped away, he snorted disdainfully and said, "Don't be surprised. This is nothing. If you see the sect leader in action, then you will know what the real sky is." Shang Tianliang glanced at him and waited until he was completely carried away before saying, "It's a miracle that this guy wasn't beaten to death 500 years ago." Chu Xiu shook his head and said, "That's why he should thank Patriarch Dugu. Otherwise, I'm afraid he wouldn't have lived to see the day the Kunlun devil cult was destroyed." Now that the biggest crisis had been resolved, everyone under his command was relaxed, including Chu Xiu. Back when Chu Xiu discovered the relics of the Heartless Demon Venerable and the Sky Weeping Demon Venerable, he had this idea. However, he also knew that this idea of his was rather risky. To be precise, it was rather risky. But this was a rare opportunity, and he would reach this step sooner or later. It was better to leave early than to leave late. This adventure might not be able to resolve the future crisis, but at least with the tiger skin of Zhong Shenxiu, no matter if it was Elysium or those righteous sects, they would not find trouble with him for a while. "What should we do next?" Mei Qinglian asked. "Are you interested in rebuilding the Yin Demon sect?" Mei Qinglian was stunned at first, then her beautiful eyes flashed with a glimmer of excitement as she said, "It's time?" Chu Xiu nodded and said, "It's almost time. During this period, neither the righteous sects nor Elysium will find trouble with us. So if we don't take advantage of this time to quickly develop our saint sect, when will we wait? A month later, gather all the forces under my command to the Kunlun Mountain for a discussion. It's time to discuss the structure of our saint sect." Being able to rebuild the Yin Demon sect was not Mei Qinglian's dream, but a responsibility that she had always been shouldering. When this responsibility was completed, she would be able to let out a sigh of relief. However, when this time came, Mei Qinglian hesitated again. "It's not like you don't know my level. I can manage some chores, but it's an entire sect. How am I going to manage it?" Chu Xiu said, "I'm preparing to restore the structure of the saint sect from 500 years ago. At that time, the Yin Demon sect will still be a vassal sect of the saint sect, but it won't need to build a sect in the outside world. At that time, you can do whatever you need to do. You only need to recruit disciples and pass down the Yin Demon sect's techniques. As for managing the sect, I'll naturally help you choose a few reliable people. Basically, you don't need to worry about anything, and the Yin Demon sect will still be able to operate normally." Hearing Chu Xiu's words, Mei Qinglian also let out a long sigh of relief. Being able to pass on the legacy of the sect would be worthy of her master and the elders of the sect. Chu Xiu had decided to redesign the structure of the devil sect, but in reality he didn't want to change anything. It would be fine as long as he followed the rules from 500 years ago. The rules set by Dugu Weiwei in the past were actually very suitable for the Kunlun devil cult. It could be said that all rivers run into the sea. The people of the devil sect all had their own personalities, and they weren't that easy to discipline. Therefore, Dugu Weiwei only had one request, and that was enough. There was only one word: obedience. The halls of the Kunlun devil cult were directly under the jurisdiction of the Kunlun devil cult, and these people were also cultivated by the Kunlun devil cult. Just like the Yin Demon sect and the Phaseless Demon sect from before, although they already had inheritances as long as they joined the Kunlun devil cult, they would also become the vassals of the Kunlun devil cult. Their sect masters and other leaders would all be conferred as devil envoys, and their positions were exactly the same as the direct hall masters of the Kunlun devil cult. There was no difference between the two sides. The advantage of doing this was that the Kunlun devil cult didn't need to precisely control everyone. They only needed to control the devil envoys of these vassal sections. As long as they could guarantee their obedience, then the entire sect would be in a state of obedience. This trick was very useful. Just look at the current Hidden Demon sect. In fact, in the entire Hidden Demon sect, most of the people were not from the direct hall of the Kunlun devil cult in the past, but from those vassal sections. However, even after 500 years, there were still some people who maintained a loyal and devoted attitude towards the Kunlun devil cult. This was already very difficult. At this time, there were also a lot of forces under Chu Xiu's command. Although everyone recognized Chu Xiu as their master, everyone had their own thoughts, and each had their own inheritance. It was very similar to the Kunlun devil cult in the past. It was somewhat unrealistic for Chu Xiu to integrate all of them into the Kunlun devil cult, so it was better to follow the rules from 500 years ago. Just as Chu Xiu was thinking about these things, above the heavenly gate in West Kunlun, countless dark clouds were densely packed, and the atmosphere was so heavy that it seemed like it was about to drip water. That was the aura that Jun Wuxian subconsciously released, and it was simply powerful to the point of being terrifying. All the Heavenly Gate generals, including some other Heavenly Gate martial artists, were hiding in their own palaces at this time and did not make a sound, for fear of provoking the Gate Master. They did not know what was going on, and they did not dare to ask. It was safer to obediently guard the array seal. In the main hall, Jun Wuxian was expressionless, but everyone could see that the anger in his heart had reached the point of no return. The fifth Qi Song sat below Jun Wuxian. Among the entire Heavenly Gate 9 great generals, only the fifth Qi Song could continue to stay with Jun Wuxian in this state of rage. Frowning, the fifth Qi Song said in confusion, "This doesn't make sense. Why would Zhong Shenxiu get together with Chu Xiu? Cause and effect? Why does this Chu Xiu also have cause and effect on him? He can even make Zhong Shenxiu personally protect him. What cause and effect does he have? Go, call Zhu Tianxiao here," Jun Wuxian suddenly said. Zhu Tianxiao was the only one among the Heavenly Gate generals who was proficient in the art of divination. What Jun Wuxian wanted to divine, the fifth Qi Song could already guess. However, he advised, "Sect Master, Zhu Tianxiao's 7 divine calculations and the 3 questions of gods and ghosts are reserved for when the seal breaks out. In a little over a year, the divine general rankings will be held. At that time, the seal will activate once. With Zhu Tianxiao's 7 divination and 3 questions of gods and ghosts, we'll be able to know which seal will activate in advance. We'll be able to reinforce it in advance, so that we won't panic when the time comes. If we use it now, Zhu Tianxiao will not be able to recover in a year's time." Jun Wuxian did not speak, but just glanced at the fifth Qi Song. With just this glance, the fifth Qi Song understood what Jun Wuxian meant. He had no choice but to call Zhu Tianxiao over. The Heavenly Gate Divine General Zhu Tianxiao was known to know the heavens. His combat power was almost the weakest among the Heavenly Gate Divine Generals, but he could survive every Divine General ranking, not because of his strength, but because of his attainments in the way of divination. After divination, even if his combat power was insufficient, he would not be eliminated. Moreover, his ability was special, so he would definitely receive some preferential treatment from Jun Wuxian. Unless there was another divine general with the same ability as him, or even someone who could replace him, appeared. In less than a quarter of an hour, a fair-skinned and chubby man in luxurious clothes with a warm smile on his face was brought in by the fifth Qi Song. He was Zhu Tianxiao. Seeing Jun Wuxian there, Zhu Tianxiao hurriedly went over and said, "Sect Master, you were looking for me?" Jun Wuxian said in a deep voice, "Help me divine Chu Xiu. I want to see what is so special about him that Zhong Shenxiu would protect him for the sake of karma." Zhu Tianxiao nodded and immediately took out all kinds of divination items. There was also a huge 8 trigrams plate, and he went back and forth in it. There was only Chu Xiu's name and nothing else. This was almost the most difficult kind of divination. In the past, when Grandmaster Yuanji had divined Chu Xiu, he had needed something related to Chu Xiu and something with Chu Xiu's aura to carry out the divination. But now it was Zhu Tianxiao, and he could do it without any effort. Sometimes, he didn't even need to use his name. After a long while, Zhu Tianxiao frowned and said, "There's nothing wrong. This Chu Xiu is very ordinary. The only thing wrong is that, if my divination isn't wrong, this Chu Xiu's fate looks like a mediocre and short-lived ordinary fate. It can even be said to be very bad. However, he was able to live until now and even had such achievements. This was simply illogical. Was the heavens messing with him? Wait, there's something wrong. There's nothing wrong. This is the biggest problem." Chapter 1068. Among the younger generation or even the entire martial art practitioners of the pugilistic world, who was qualified to stir up the world. Among them, the most outstanding was Chu Xiu. Although Chu Xiu was an enemy of the Heavenly Gate, it was not an exaggeration to say that he was extremely talented. Such a person, such an existence, how could he be a mediocre short-lived ghost? He must have great luck and great karma on him. Du Qi Song asked doubtfully, I say, did you sleep for too long, and your divination went wrong? Did it go to someone else? There are many people called Chu Xiu in this world. Zhu Dunshao seemed to have been humiliated, and the fat on his face was trembling. Lord Diwu, you can say that I am weak, but you can't say that my divination is inaccurate. There are many people called Chu Xiu in this world, but there is only one person called Chu Xiu who has a karmic relationship with the Heavenly Gate. My 7 divination can deduce 7 layers of karma. Even if there is no name, as long as I am given a little bit of karmic relationship, I can deduce it 7 times. The 7 layers of karma match up with Chu Xiu. There is absolutely no mistake in my divination. Diwu Qisong was also slightly doubtful. He actually believed in Zhu Tianxiao's ability. The other party's attainments in the way of divination were comparable to Su Jing of the Great Light Temple and Xiao Maha of the Sabodhi Monastery. His 7 divination and 3 questions of the deities and ghosts were especially amazing. Every time they were used, he needed a long time to recuperate, and the results he could deduce were even more than those 2. Jun Wuxian was expressionless as he said lightly, continue the divination. Zhu Tianxiao nodded with a serious expression on his chubby face. He took out a writing brush, but the hair on it was scarlet red. With a point of his finger, a bloody hole appeared on his arm. Zhu Tianxiao dipped the brush in his own blood and drew hideous and twisted runes in the air. By the time all the runes were finished, Zhu Tianxiao's entire body was trembling. His eyes were rolling back, and he was trembling as if he was dancing. Indistinct syllables came out of his mouth, like the murmurs of a ghost. A moment later, a cold and sinister aura enveloped Zhu Tianxiao, covering his entire body with demonic runes. Zhu Tianxiao's 3 questions of gods and ghosts wasn't an orthodox Taoist or Buddhist divination technique. Instead, it was a secret technique of an ancient barbarian tribe. To be more precise, it was an evil technique. Before the ancient era, it should be said to be the legendary immemorial era. It was said that in that era, immortals and Buddhas were everywhere and gods and demons ran amok. Now, even though they had already died, their wills were still fused with the heavens and earth, immortal and indestructible. The 3 questions of gods and ghosts asked about using one's own blood as a sacrifice to draw demonic marks, causing the will of the demon god or evil god wandering between heaven and earth to possess one's body and interrogate them. However, the price of sacrificing essence blood and the evil god's possession was too great. Even with Zhu Tianxiao's true fire spirit refinement realm cultivation, he couldn't bear the consumption. So, after using it once, he often needed several years to recover. Jun Wuxian and Diwu Qisong stood there watching Zhu Tianxiao dance. The scene was very comical, but their expressions were very serious. After a while, Zhu Tianxiao suddenly stopped trembling. The demonic marks on his face quickly disappeared, and he suddenly spat out a mouthful of blood, falling to the ground. Diwu Qisong quickly went over to help him up, and asked in surprise, what happened? This wasn't the first time that Zhu Tianxiao had used the 3 questions of gods and ghosts, but this had never happened before. The wills of the ghosts and gods were very fair. As long as one accepted the blood sacrifice, they would definitely not harm anyone's life, unless one was weak and still had to use such a forbidden technique. Zhu Tianxiao's face had a trace of shock, as if he had seen something terrifying. I saw a huge hand, and it erased everything that had to do with Chu Xiu. I wanted to test it out and follow that hand to find the person behind it, but I was instantly devoured by it. The wills of the gods and demons that I summoned even dissipated directly. Jun Wuxian was slightly moved. Now, he could be sure that Chu Xiu was really not an ordinary person. He might really have some mysterious karma on him. Can you estimate what kind of existence the owner of that hand is? Jun Wuxian asked. Zhu Tianxiao smiled bitterly and said, I can't find out at all. The existence of the other party is already beyond my imagination. Jun Wuxian nodded and waved his hand, saying, Go get a bottle of Green Dragon Emu Life Reversal Elixir. You don't have to participate in the ranking of divine generals this time. Zhu Tianxiao was shocked when he heard that. There was no need to be so ruthless, right? He just hadn't divined the background of Chu Xiu, but in the end he didn't even have the qualification to be a divine general? Seeing Zhu Tianxiao's expression, Jun Wuxian knew that he was wrong. He said lightly, I mean this time, you just keep the position of divine general. There's no need to compete with them. Zhu Tianxiao let out a long breath when he heard that. He wanted to complain to Jun Wuxian for taking too long to speak, but he didn't have the guts. After Zhu Tianxiao left, Fifth Qisong said cautiously, Sect Master, it seems that Chu Xiu has secrets on him, and he is also protected by Zhong Shenxiu. I'm afraid we can't touch him now. Jun Wuxian nodded and said lightly, For the time being, we can't touch him. Fifth Qisong frowned slightly. He had followed Jun Wuxian for so many years, and he understood Jun Wuxian's character. Jun Wuxian only said that they couldn't touch him for the time being, but he didn't say that he would never touch Chu Xiu. However, Fifth Qisong didn't intend to persuade him on this matter. This time, their heavenly gates was indeed very sullen. 2 of their divine generals had been killed, but they couldn't do anything to the other party. In particular, Chu Xiu had actually killed Divine Lord Luo in front of him. This made Fifth Qisong feel extremely sullen. It could be said that if he was given a chance, even he wouldn't let Chu Xiu go. At this time, a storm was set off in the underworld because of the incident at Kunlun Mountain. Previously, the major sects had joined forces to go to Kunlun Mountain, saying that they wanted to destroy the devil cult. The momentum was simply shocking. Everyone thought that this time, Chu Xiu would definitely not be able to hold on. However, who would have thought that not only did Chu Xiu hold on, but he also had a relationship with the world's #1 expert, Zhong Shenxiu. The Lord of the Great Freedom Sky, the most mysterious existence in the entire underworld, was also the strongest existence. He had forced the Heavenly Gates sect master to retreat by himself, causing the entire alliance of the righteous sects to retreat. This kind of power was simply like a miracle. Although this was not the first time that Zhong Shenxiu had made a move, there were relatively few people who had seen it in the primitive demon's cave. Moreover, the matter was not too big. It was only spread by a small number of experts. This time, there were tens of thousands of martial artists who had seen it. Almost instantly, the news spread throughout the underworld. It could be said that this time at Kunlun Mountain, the most outstanding person was not Chu Xiu, but Zhong Shenxiu. Of course, the existence of Chu Xiu would not be ignored. It must be known that Chu Xiu had fought Ling Yunzi in front of everyone. Although there was no winner or loser, it was a draw with Ling Yunzi. Although the current Chu Xiu was not in existence in the heaven and earth mysterious realm, with the current strength and influence of Chu Xiu, it was enough for him to stabilize his position as the supreme of the underworld. If it were not for Wind Manlu's scruples about the face of the righteous sects, he would have probably directly put Chu Xiu on the sovereign list. After this storm, the rise of the demonic path had become a fact. More and more martial artists in the underworld flocked to the Kunlun devil cult. And after a month, all the forces under Chu Xiu's command came to Kunlun Mountain to prepare for a meeting. It was also to discuss the power structure of the entire Kunlun devil cult. The previous peak of Kunlun Mountain had almost been destroyed. During this time, all the disciples who joined the Kunlun devil cult were rebuilding the Kunlun devil cult, so in a month, the main hall of the entire Kunlun devil cult had been built. Of course, there was still no array. It was just for show. Real pellet state martial artists could easily break it. It was not easy to arrange an array that covered the entire hall. It would take Master Yuanji and several array masters of the Kunlun devil cult at least 3 months to complete it. At this time, in the main hall, Chu Xiu was sitting in the seat of honor. Below him, Lu Jianghe, Mei Qinglian, Chu Wuji and others were all there. There were also Qin Chaoxian, Yu Moya and other martial artists of the Yinma lineage, some martial artists of the Jianghu Hall, people of Shang Tianliang's merchant city, Chu Yuanxing of the Guanzhong torture room, Duanmu Qianshan and Mu Zi of the Blue Dragon Society, and so on. Friends like Lu Fengxian and Luo Feiheng, who had a close relationship with Chu Xiu, were also there. Even the northern Yan royal family sent Xiang Wu to watch the ceremony. It could be said that this was the first time that all of Chu Xiu's forces had gathered together. Even Chu Xiu himself hadn't expected that he would gather so many forces under him at some point in time. Previously, these forces were too mixed. Maybe once there was a crisis, it would be very difficult for Chu Xiu to mobilize all of them. Now that they were integrated, it was much more convenient than before. Looking at the people present, Chu Xiu said in a deep voice, "Everyone, 500 years ago, the Kunlun devil cult dominated the entire underworld here, pushing our demonic lineage to the peak. But it was also here that our demonic lineage fell to the bottom and lay dormant for 500 years. Some of you here are not from the demonic lineage, but it doesn't matter. What is right? What is a demon? The underworld is chaotic and the world is in conflict. If the victor says he is right, then he is right. If the victor says he is a demon, then he is a demon. With your trust, I, Chu Xiu, have been able to reach my current position. Be it the righteous or the demonic, as long as you are willing to follow me, Chu Xiu, the only thing I can bring you is victory." Among the people present, be it the righteous or the demonic, they all had a close relationship with Chu Xiu. It could be said that their own interests were firmly tied to Chu Xiu's. Just as Chu Xiu had said, they followed Chu Xiu not because they were righteous or demonic, but because they wanted to be the victor in this era of great conflict in the underworld. Chapter 1069. The structure of the Kunlun devil cult that Chu Xiu had prepared was almost exactly the same as the Kunlun devil cult 500 years ago. For example, the Crimson devil cult, Mei Qinglian's shadow devil cult, and the Phaseless devil cult still retained their sect style. However, they had to set up a branch of their sect on Kunlun Mountain and send people to guard it so that they could pass messages anytime and anywhere. The rest of the organizations that were not part of the demonic path, such as the Blue Dragon Society, also joined the Kunlun devil cult and became its vassals. Just like what Chu Xiu had said, regardless of whether they were righteous or evil, as long as they stood on Chu Xiu's side, Chu Xiu could only bring them victory. The one closest to the righteous sects was actually the Guanzhong torture room. However, the Guanzhong torture room was the first force that Chu Xiu had managed. To put it bluntly, Chu Xiu's prestige was higher than that of Chu Yuanxing and any other torture officer of the Guanzhong torture room. But this time, Chu Yuanxing stood on Chu Xiu's side without hesitation. If Chu Yuanxing's attitude towards Chu Xiu was a little complicated before, then now, he was completely grateful towards Chu Xiu. Because Chu Xiu had helped him to avenge his father's death. The hatred of his father's death was absolutely irreconcilable. Divine Lord Luo had killed Chu Kuanga and even destroyed Chu Kuanga's mausoleum after a few decades. This was simply adding hatred to hatred. But Chu Yuanxing couldn't do anything because the other party was the Divine General of Elysium, a legendary supreme existence. In the end, not long ago, there was news that Chu Xiu had killed Tianmen Luo Divine Lord, which caused Jun Wuxian to go to Kunlun to find trouble with him. After hearing the news, Chu Yuanxing got drunk for a whole day. He paid his respects to Chu Kuanga again and directly brought his people to Kunlun. At this moment, there was no need to talk about the Guanzhong Disciplinary Hall becoming a vassal of the Kunlun demon sect. Even if they wanted him, Chu Yuanxing, to join the Kunlun demon sect, he would be willing. Apart from these forces, the rest of the people formed the direct subordinates of the Kunlun devil cult. The name of the Jianghu Hall didn't need to be changed, but it was directly changed from the Northern Yan Jianghu Hall to the Kunlun devil cult's Jianghu Hall. The Northern Yan people didn't have any objections to this. Now, Chu Xiu naturally wouldn't continue to be the hall master of the Jianghu Hall. However, the Jianghu Hall was already very large. Chu Xiu didn't think that anyone could be in charge of the Jianghu Hall alone. Therefore, he directly changed the leaders of the Jianghu Hall to 3 people, Tangya, Yan Bugui, and Pang Hu. On Chu Wuji's side, he led some of Elder Wei's direct subordinates to establish the 5 Demon Hall. The purpose was to commemorate the former 5 demons of 9 Heaven Mountain. Of course, the position of the Hall Master couldn't belong to Elder Wei, so it was held by Chu Wuji. The 9-branch hall under Luo Feiheng was also merged into the Kunlun Devil Cult and became one of the halls of the Kunlun Devil Cult. Lu Jianghu also rebuilt his Blood Demon Hall and was selecting disciples in the Kunlun Devil Cult. What surprised Chu Xiu was that Lu Fengxian also agreed to join the Kunlun Devil Cult and establish a branch hall. In fact, with Lu Fengxian's character, he was the worst at this kind of thing. He could stay in the Kunlun Devil Cult to help Chu Xiu, but he was not used to establishing a branch hall and managing so many people. He wasn't good at it either. However, his 4 subordinates, Shui Wuxiang, strongly suggested this to Lu Fengxian. They were all generals under Marquis Lu Wenhou in the past. Lu Fengxian was not good at this kind of thing, but they were very good at it. Therefore, with Lu Fengxian as the leader, they established the Demon God Hall. As for the so-called Demon Lords, Lu Jianghu wanted to encourage Chu Xiu to create one of the 4 great Demon Lords and make him the Blood Sea Demon Lord. This would fulfill his wish, but Chu Xiu rejected it. At this time, even Shang Tianliang, who was the strongest among Chu Xiu's subordinates, could not compare to the 4 great Demon Lords of the past. If he created another Demon Lord, it would be a joke. When you have the strength, even if you don't give yourself the title of Demon Lord, the outside world will use it. This was the distribution of power after Chu Xiu rebuilt the Kunlun Devil Cult. Of course, it was still incomparable to the Kunlun Devil Cult of the past. Whether it was the vassal forces or the halls, it did not even reach 1/10 of the peak of the Kunlun Devil Cult. But it did not matter. The Kunlun Devil Cult still had time to develop. What Chu Xiu lacked now was time. After arranging everything, Chu Xiu could actually go and be a hands-off shopkeeper with peace of mind. The hall masters of the various halls and the other leaders could deal with the miscellaneous tasks. After everyone dispersed, Jianghu came over and said goodbye to Chu Xiu. "Official Chu, since there is nothing here, I will go back and report these things to His Majesty." However, His Majesty still hopes that the Jianghu Hall can still stay in the Northern Yan and help the Northern Yan suppress the Jianghu forces. Chu Xiu nodded and said, "Of course, the Jianghu Hall will stay in the Northern Yan. Only a small number of people will be left to guard the Kunlun Mountain. Not many people have come to the Kunlun Mountain before. Marquis Xiang, why don't you stay a little longer?" Xiang Wu curled his lips and said, "Don't be unhappy if I tell you the truth. There is only a snowy mountain here. What is there to play with? There is not even a banana." Chu Xiu's expression was slightly strange. It was indeed more difficult to find a banana in the Kunlun Mountain than to find a Tian Shan snow lotus. After Xiang Wu left, Chu Xiu directly went into closed-door training. Everything that needed to be arranged had been arranged. During this time, there should be no trouble for him. The Kunlun Devil Cult could also develop in peace for a period of time. This time, Chu Xiu actually had the intention to comprehend the mysterious realm of heaven and earth when he went into closed-door training. At present, Chu Xiu had almost reached the peak of the real fire spiritual cultivation realm. He could be said to be invincible among those of the same level. However, Chu Xiu had not yet touched the bottleneck of the mysterious realm of heaven and earth. To be precise, Chu Xiu did not have the slightest clue about the entire realm. Comparing the mysterious realm of heaven and earth with the real fire spiritual cultivation realm, the biggest difference between the two was that one borrowed the power of heaven and earth, and the other controlled the power of heaven and earth. The former depended on the heaven and earth and went with the flow. How much power could be exerted, in fact, mainly depended on the heaven and earth. Secondly, it depended on how much power one could borrow. When one reached the mysterious realm of heaven and earth, borrowing became controlling. Controlling a part of heaven and earth, and even changing some of the rules, making oneself the master of this part of heaven and earth. This was the mysterious realm of heaven and earth. Therefore, the key to the mysterious realm of heaven and earth was the control of the rules. In this aspect, Chu Xiu had no clue for the time being. In this aspect, the only person Chu Xiu could ask was Shang Tianyang. In the end, Shang Tianyang's answer was that he did not know either. Whether it was the rules or the bottleneck of the mysterious realm of heaven and earth, If you knew it, then you knew it. If you didn't know, then you didn't know. You could comprehend it, but you couldn't say it or describe it. This kind of realm in itself could not be analyzed. Of course, right now, Chu Xiu's situation was still better than Yi Xiaonan's. Yi Xiaonan wanted to surpass the mysterious realm of heaven and earth, but it was a pity that the next realm was simply a fog for him. Right now, Chu Xiu at least had a direction. There were countless successful examples, so he could try again. With this attempt, Chu Xiu tried for 5 months straight away. In these 5 months, the structure of the Kunlun devil cult had already taken shape. The various vassal forces and divisions had also begun to operate normally. In fact, the difference from before wasn't that great. The Kunlun devil cult was far away from the central plains, and the vassal forces were still within their sphere of influence. It was just that there was an additional group of people passing news on the Kunlun Mountains. At this moment, in the secret seclusion room in the main palace of the Kunlun devil cult, Chu Xiu sat cross-legged on the ground. His body was motionless, and no energy was being emitted from his body. However, his spirit had been completely released. He was constantly deducing and thinking about the mysterious realm of heaven and earth. At this moment, there was a knock on the door of the secret seclusion room. In an instant, Chu Xiu's spirit had returned. Chu Xiu suddenly opened his eyes. With a wave of his hand, his Gangqi opened the door of the secret seclusion room, revealing Mei Qinglian's figure. What's wrong? Did those guys from the orthodox martial arts world come up with something again? Or did the divine general of Elysium come to provoke us? Mei Qinglian had a strange expression as she said, "Neither. It's just that recently, Luo Feiheng's 9 divisions sent a piece of news. It's a very strange piece of news." Chu Xiu said in surprise, "Oh, what news?" "The reincarnation of Dugu Weiwei has appeared." "What?" Previously, Chu Xiu had been very calm. However, when this piece of news came out, he had a shocked expression on his face. He even suspected that he had heard wrongly. Mei Qinglian, who was sitting opposite him, also had the same awkward expression. This was because she also knew about the trap that Chu Xiu had set up. Everything was obviously fabricated by Chu Xiu. In the end, a reincarnation of Dugu Weiwei had really appeared. This was simply indescribable. Chu Xiu walked out of the secret seclusion room. With a wave of his hand, his Gangqi dispersed the dust on his clothes. He asked, "What exactly is going on? You should know that I was the one who set up this trap." Mei Qinglian also had a strange expression on her face as she said, "The matter first appeared in a small city in the southern region of eastern Qi. A disciple of a small local aristocratic family, who happens to be 18 this year, publicly announced that he was the reincarnation of Dugu Weiwei. Today, he finally awakened and wants to return to Kunlun to take back his position as the Devil Master." In an instant, there were many people who responded. Even an old demonic senior in the true fire spiritual refinement realm who had lived in seclusion for a long time joined him and was extremely respectful to him. Right now, this person has caused quite a stir in the southern region of eastern Qi. Some of the orthodox sects are probably already investigating the truth about him. Chu Xiu frowned and said, "He said that he is, and there is even an old demonic senior in the true fire spiritual refinement realm who believes him. The other party didn't join our demonic cult but chose to believe a person of unknown origin. That kid, could he be a puppet of the other party?" Mei Qinglian shook her head with a wry smile and said, "I really don't know. The reason why so many people believe him is that he has several secret techniques of Kunlun devil cult. Some of them are even unique martial arts created by the cult master in the early days. Even my Yinmo lineage doesn't have them. Moreover, he also has the scabbard of the cult master Ting Chunyu as a token. The most important thing is that he was only in the inborn realm before, but he skyrocketed to the real pellet state overnight. These things together are enough to make people regard him as the reincarnation of the cult master." Chapter 1070. Chu Xiu listened to Mei Qinglian. Even he had to admit that if that was the case, then the other party was indeed very similar to the reincarnation of Dugu Weiwei. To be more precise, it was even more similar than what Chu Xiu had fabricated. Are you sure that the martial arts that the other party mastered are the martial arts of the former leader? The scabbard of Ting Chunyu is also real? Chu Xiu was still a little doubtful. Mei Qinglian nodded and said, 90% of it is real. The elder of the Devil Dao who relied on him was the direct descendant of the Devil Cloud Hall, Fang Yundu. He was a big shot of the Devil Dao in the same generation as Elder Wei. However, he had already retired from the Jianghu and hadn't made a move for 70 to 80 years. Even the righteous sects wouldn't find trouble with him. Because he retired from the Jianghu early, other than Elder Wei and the others, we don't have much of a relationship with him. Moreover, he is old-fashioned and doesn't really like us young juniors of the Devil Dao. Previously, when we were about to rebuild the Holy Sect, Headmaster Ren of the Phaseless Devil Sect specially went to look for him. In the end, he was scolded by him. He said that in this world, other than the leader, no one was qualified to go to Kunlun, and no one was qualified to rebuild the Devil Dao and so on. At that time, Headmaster Ren thought that the strength of the Holy Sect was already strong enough. It didn't matter if he had one more or one less person, so he didn't pay much attention to him and didn't tell you about this matter. However, as the direct descendant of the Holy Sect, Fang Yundu still has good eyesight. He didn't even approve of us, but approved of that kid. It can be imagined that the things that kid has on him should be real. And when the news came, I also went to ask Lu Jianghe. Lu Jianghe also said that those martial arts were indeed mastered by the leader, but they were used before the leader became famous. They weren't as famous as the 3-city-destroying arrow and the misty slash. Mei Qinglian said all this in one breath. Even Chu Xiu had to admit that the other party really looked like the reincarnation of Dugu Weiwei. However, Chu Xiu still said directly, it's fake. At the very least, it's half real, 90% fake, and the remaining half is uncertain. The so-called reincarnation of Dugu Weiwei was just a lie that he made up. The so-called age of 18 was just a lie. He just said it casually to clear his suspicion. After all, in the entire Jianghu, if Dugu Weiwei's reincarnation was the most similar to the reincarnation of Dugu Weiwei, it would be Chu Xiu. Now, someone took the lie that he made up and said that he was the real one. This was simply asking for trouble. As for the uncertainty, it was because there was definitely something strange about the other party, and there was definitely something hidden. The scabbard of Listen to Spring Rain, a part of Dugu Weiwei's martial inheritance, had a very suspicious origin. Moreover, in Chu Xiu's opinion, there were two possibilities for the other party's behavior. One was that the other party really had something to rely on and was not afraid of anything. That was why he revealed his identity with such great fanfare. The second was that the other party was purely an idiot. He had reached a certain level of innocence. That was why he revealed his identity with such great fanfare, as if he was afraid that others would not know. Go and make the arrangements. We will go to Eastern Qi later. Chu Xiu directly waved his hand and made a decision. Regardless of whether the other party was real or fake, since the other party could take out so many things that belonged to Dugu Weiwei, it must have some kind of connection with Dugu Weiwei. Chu Xiu must go personally to see what was going on. At this time, in the southern part of Eastern Qi, Shu City, this was originally just an ordinary small city in the south. Because it was close to the southern barbarian land, the area was not very good. Only some martial artists who came and went to the southern barbarian 100,000 mountains to collect herbs would temporarily rest here, so the area was not large. However, at this time, Shu City could be said to be a place where demons were dancing. Many demonic Dao martial artists gathered here, wanting to worship the reincarnation of Patriarch Dugu. Although Chu Xiu had rebuilt the Kunlun devil cult, not everyone would choose to join Chu Xiu. After all, in the demonic Dao, there were many people who did not like Chu Xiu. Another point was that although Chu Xiu was eager to develop his own forces, he did not want any rotten fish or shrimp. Martial artists who wanted to join the Kunlun devil cult either had strength, potential, or ability. You only needed one of these three, but similarly, if you did not even have one of these three, then you would not be able to join the Kunlun devil cult. Some martial artists who were eliminated by the Kunlun devil cult, or those who knew that they did not meet the requirements of the Kunlun devil cult, gathered here at this time to join the reincarnation of Patriarch Dugu. At this time, in a large mansion in Shu City, a young man who looked a little immature but had a face full of pride was listening to the report of his subordinates. He waved his hand lightly and said, "Tell the other martial arts forces in the southern barbarian land that I will give them 3 days to choose. Either they join the sacred sect or they die. I don't want to hear a third choice." "Yes, sect leader." The subordinates nodded respectfully and left. This young man was the person who claimed to be the reincarnation of Dugu Weiwei. Previously, he was just Han Ping, the legitimate son of the Han family, a small local family in Shu City. What big family could there be in a small city like Shu City, which was close to the southern barbarian land? The Han family's strength in Shu City was already considered the top, and his father was only at the Three-Flower realm. There were only 3 counties in the entire southern barbarian land. These 3 counties were not ranked within the Eastern Qi. It could be said that as long as there was a martial Dao Grandmaster, it would be a big shot. As a result, this Han Ping had skyrocketed from the innate realm to the real pellet realm overnight. He even claimed that he was the reincarnation of Dugu Weiwei and had awakened. This immediately caused a sensation in the entire southern barbarian land and even the underworld. At this time, an old man with white hair and beard and a solemn face walked in and said in a deep voice, "Sect leader, I'm afraid you're being a little careless this time. Although you have awakened now, your strength has not yet fully recovered. If you publicize your identity so early and make the entire underworld know about it, I'm afraid it will be a little dangerous." This old man was the first senior of the demonic Dao to seek refuge with Han Ping. He was the direct descendant of the demon cloud Hall, Fang Yundu. Han Ping waved his hand indifferently when he heard this and said, "It doesn't matter. With my power 500 years ago, do Su Yun of the Great Light Temple and Ling Yunzi of the Chunyang Dao sect have the courage to make a move in front of me? Also, that Chu Xiu is currently occupying the Kunlun mountain of this deity. Now, this deity is giving him a chance. I have already sent someone to deliver a message to him. As long as he personally brings people down the mountain to welcome this deity into Kunlun, this deity will confer him the position of Hall Master. If I don't publicize this, no one will know about this. It's just like you, Elder Fang. If I don't publicize my identity, how will you know who I am and come to seek refuge with me?" Fang Yundu nodded and said, "That's true. However, sect leader, I would like to ask something. In the past, it was said that part of the Demon Cloud Hall's cultivation technique complemented the Demon Wind Hall's. However, that part of the cultivation technique has disappeared. I wonder if sect leader can bestow that part of the cultivation technique to me so that my abilities can improve a little more?" Fang Yundu's words were a little probing. In the beginning, Fang Yundu had believed that Han Ping was the reincarnation of Dugu Weiwei. He had quite a number of secret techniques exclusive to Dugu Weiwei, which were all recorded in the Demon Cloud Hall's books. In addition, Han Ping also had Ting Chun Yu's scabbard and some of the Kunlun devil cult's heirloom. After careful investigation, he found that Han Ping was born 18 years ago in the year of Jiaxin. On the day of his birth, there was a heavenly phenomenon. The entire southern region was covered in dark clouds, a storm was raging, and a thunderbolt turned into a ball and blasted right in front of the Han family's door. All of these showed that Han Ping was extraordinary. However, the Han family was too timid. They thought that it was some kind of inauspicious summon, so they gave Han Ping this name, which meant that he would live a peaceful life and not die prematurely and so on. However, when the news of Han Ping's reincarnation of Dugu Weiwei came out, everyone seemed to remember that this was not an inauspicious summon, but a heavenly phenomenon. These were all the results of Fang Yundu's own investigation. Coupled with the previous things, Fang Yundu was very convinced that Han Ping was the reincarnation of the sect leader. In the eyes of an extremely inflexible Devil Dao martial artist like Fang Yundu, the Yinma clan had betrayed the holy sect. Who was Chu Xiu to have the qualifications to rebuild the devil sect and ascend to Kunlun? It was like a sparrow occupying a dove's nest. Therefore, Fang Yundu was extremely disdainful of Chu Xiu, and even a little hostile. However, when the news of Han Ping's reincarnation of Dugu Weiwei spread, he took the initiative to seek refuge. After verifying these conditions, he became even more loyal. However, as Fang Yundu spent more time with Han Ping, he felt that something was not right. Han Ping seemed to rarely mention the various things about the Kunlun devil cult in the past. He did not know much about the general knowledge of the Kunlun devil cult, even less than Fang Yundu himself. Moreover, looking at the way he did things, it was simply a mess. Basically, he hit his head and came up with an idea without any order to speak of. Was a person of this level really the reincarnation of the sect leader? This made Fang Yundu a little suspicious. Although Chu Xiu did not know the rules and occupied a dove's nest, his strength and ability were recognized by the world. This was something that even Fang Yundu had to admit. However, the ability of the reincarnation of Patriarch Dugu in front of him was simply incomparable to that of Chu Xiu. This time, Fang Yundu really could not bear it anymore, so he opened his mouth to test Han Ping. Han Ping was not an idiot. He could hear that Fang Yundu's tone was a little strange. He sighed and said, "Elder Fang, it's not that I don't want to tell you, but I can't remember. I slept for 500 years, and only 18 years ago did my true spirit finally reincarnate. I only truly woke up a few days ago. The damage was a little too serious, even my memory was damaged, and I have forgotten a lot of things. However, Elder Fang, don't worry. In the future, when my strength is restored, my memory will also be restored. Those things that you want, I can give them to you. I will not forget meritorious service. Even if Chu Xiu brings the entire Kunlun devil cult to seek refuge with me now, I will only give him the position of hall leader. As for you, Elder Fang, you will be one of the future 4 great demon lords." Chapter 1071. The scheme that Chu Xiu had set up back then was a lie, but there were too many coincidences in this matter. There was actually someone who coincidentally matched the lie. Han Ping's explanation was reasonable, so Fang Yundu only thought about it for a moment before understanding. After all, the leader had only been born in a small, mediocre family for the past 18 years, so his knowledge was naturally limited. All he could do now was try his best to help the leader recover his previous strength. This way, his memories would naturally be completely awakened, and he would become the demonic Dugu Weiwei of the past. At the same time, what Han Ping and the others did not know was that most of the righteous sect's warriors had already gathered in the southern part of Eastern Qi. Previously, Ling Yunzi and the others had spent a long time searching for Dugu Weiwei's reincarnation, but they had found nothing. Now, he had come to them of his own accord. This made Ling Yunzi and the others excited, but in the depths of their hearts, they were actually terrified. This was Dugu Weiwei, the legendary supreme demon lord, a powerful existence that brought endless pressure to the martial world. The unknown was the most terrifying. At least for now, Ling Yunzi and the others knew that the other was in Shu City, and that his strength was not as strong as theirs, but they did not dare to act rashly. They only established a base outside Shu City. In the tent, Ling Yunzi, Lu Changlu, Zhang Daoling, and the other 3 leaders of Taoism were there. The Buddhists had come from the Great Light Temple, and Subodhi Monastery had only sent Rama. The other heaven and earth abstruse realm cultivator, Bukong Monk, was in seclusion and did not come. Bukong Monk had just awakened from cultivating the undying Zen, and his spirit and primordial spirit were slightly damaged. He went into seclusion. Last time, he went to the Kunlun devil cult first because of the urgency of the matter. It would not be too late to go into seclusion after destroying the Kunlun devil cult. In the end, things ended anticlimactically. Bukong Monk realized that his primordial spirit was severely damaged, and he had forgotten some things. For example, he felt that Chu Xiu looked familiar, but he could not remember what was familiar about him. So when he returned to Subodhi Monastery, he went into seclusion. No one could disturb him. In the tent, Ling Yunzi looked at Zhang Daoling and frowned. "Brother Zhang, why didn't the old celestial master come this time?" In the entire Jianghu, only he has met Dugu Weiwei face to face. If that person really is Dugu Weiwei's reincarnation, only the celestial master would be able to recognize him. Everyone looked at Zhang Daoling, waiting for him to give an explanation. The last time they went to Kunlun Mountain together, the Taoist master's mansion did not come. In the end, they found out later that the Taoist master's mansion had come, but they did not follow them up the mountain. Instead, they wandered around the foot of Kunlun Mountain. This time, they knew what the Taoist master's mansion was up to, and it disgusted them. The celestial master abode's way of doing things was simply too careless. However, they could not say anything about it. However, it would be too much if the old celestial master still didn't show up. After all, everyone in the Jianghu knew that only the old celestial master came from the era of Dugu Weiwei. Now that the reincarnation of Dugu Weiwei had appeared, if the old celestial master did not come to identify him, who would? Zhang Daoling coughed and said, "Everyone knows that the old celestial master is old, and has long stopped caring about the affairs of the Taoist master's mansion. His body is getting weaker day by day, and he can only rest in the mountain behind the Taoist master's mansion. Coincidentally, he is not feeling well and is in seclusion to stabilize his condition. He really can't go out, so he did not come." Upon hearing this, the crowd simply didn't know where to start ridiculing. They did not expect that Zhang Daoling, a guy with thick eyebrows and big eyes, would lie without batting an eyelid. It was true that the old celestial master was old. Not counting the monk Bukong who practiced the undying Zen, and the imprisoned Lu Jianghe, there was no one older than him in the entire Jianghu. But everyone knew that the old celestial master was old but strong. Although he was not young, his combat power did not weaken at all. Instead, it was stronger. A few years ago, he even fought with Yi Shaonan. Although he was at a disadvantage, it was not a huge defeat. And everyone knew that the old celestial master was leisurely sunbathing in the mountain behind the Taoist master's mansion. When did he need to rest? Why did he only feel unwell at this time? Everyone looked helpless, but it was not good to fall out with the Taoist master's mansion at this time. When he saw everyone's expression, Zhang Daoling finally understood why the old celestial master told him to be shameless. Sometimes, being shameless was really useful. Just like now, everyone knew that he was evading, but they could not do anything about it. It must be said that this feeling was really good. At this moment, there was a commotion outside. Everyone frowned. Real martial arts sect's Han Jusi stood up and said, "I'll go take a look." He got up and walked out. Instantly, the hostility on his face increased. It was Chu Xiu who came to the alliance of the righteous camp. Chu Xiu did not come here to cause trouble, but to gather information. After all, the Kunlun devil cult had just been established. Their information network in the Central Plains was not complete. For the information here, only Luo Feiheng and the Blue Dragon Society in Eastern Qi had passed on some partial information. It was not comprehensive. As for the Alliance of the Righteous, Chu Xiu was sure that they had studied Han Pingxi thoroughly. They could even dig out his ancestors. "Chu Xiu, what are you doing here?" Han Jusi looked at Chu Xiu with an unfriendly gaze. It should be said that he was very unfriendly. It could even be said that he was hostile. Han Jusi was not from this era. Even if the real martial arts sect still existed, he still felt a little alienated from the current real martial arts sect. Therefore, the person who had the best relationship with him was Yun Mingzi, who was his old rival from 800 years ago. In the end, Yun Mingzi died in the hands of Chu Xiu. Even among the group of warriors from 800 years ago, half of them had already died in the hands of Chu Xiu. Yun Mingzi was dead. The people of the devil sect were also dead. Chu Xiu was like their nemesis. Chu Xiu said lightly, "Don't be so nervous. I just came to ask you some information. You are concerned about the reincarnation of Master Dugu. I am also concerned about it. How about sharing it?" Han Jusi said coldly, "Chu Xiu, don't think that we can't do anything to you. The whole righteous martial arts world can't do anything to you. Today, if it is confirmed that Dugu Weiwei is real, we will immediately get rid of him so that he can no longer cause trouble in Jianghu." Chu Xiu was too lazy to talk nonsense with Han Jusi. He said directly, "Get out of the way." A Taoist sword appeared in Han Jusi's hand, and a wisp of Taoist connotation affected the surrounding power of heaven and earth. However, at the moment when he held the sword, Chu Xiu had already unsheathed the breaking formation saber on his waist. Wherever the devil saber passed, everything was reduced to the power of Yin. Even the power of heaven and earth that was affected by Han Jusi's Taoist connotation was turned into the power of Yin and exploded in front of Chu Xiu's saber. A huge force attacked Han Jusi. It was the simplest and most direct physical force, which was unstoppable. He shouted and gathered all the strength in his body. However, he was still sent flying more than 30 meters away by Chu Xiu's saber and crashed into the door of the tent. His face suddenly turned from white to red, and he couldn't help but spit out a mouthful of blood. He looked at Chu Xiu with deep horror in his eyes. How long had it been since they joined forces to besiege Chu Xiu? Chu Xiu's strength had skyrocketed to such an extent that he couldn't even take a single saber strike from him. Now, if the 5 of them continued to besiege Chu Xiu, they would probably be crushed. Who could stop Chu Xiu's saber? In fact, during this period of time, although Chu Xiu was thinking about the way out of the mysterious realm of heaven and earth, he didn't waste time thinking about it. While he was looking for the bottleneck, the power around Chu Xiu was also condensing and strengthening step by step. Although his combat power didn't increase exponentially, his control over his power had become stronger. The movement of the battle here immediately alarmed Ling Yunzi and the others. They came out one after another and surrounded Chu Xiu and the others in the center, looking unfriendly. Although Chu Xiu had the protection of Zhong Shenxiu, they weren't afraid that Chu Xiu would really have no scruples. Even if Zhong Shenxiu personally came down, as long as they were forced to the bottom line, they wouldn't just let themselves be captured. Chu Xiu said indifferently, "Everyone, there's no need to be so nervous. I've already said that I've come this time only to inquire about the situation and see if that fellow is impersonating Sect Master Dugu. After I ask clearly, I will naturally leave. It's just that this Taoist Han Jusi seems to be biased against me and wants to draw his sword in front of me, so I can only be impolite." Ling Yunzi looked at Chu Xiu for a long time and suddenly said, "If that Dugu Weiwei's reincarnation is fake, then what will you do?" Chu Xiu narrowed his eyes and said, "Some lies can be said, but some can't. When the time comes, I will let him know that if he says something wrong, he needs to pay with his life." Seeing Chu Xiu's attitude, Ling Yunzi suddenly said, "Give him the news." From Chu Xiu's attitude, Ling Yunzi seemed to be able to discern something. Chu Xiu didn't seem to want that Dugu Weiwei's reincarnation to be real. When most demonic path martial artists heard this news, their normal reaction would be to be ecstatic. But Chu Xiu was different. His first reaction was to doubt whether the other party was real or not. This attitude was obvious. Chu Xiu was the current leader of the Kunlun Devil cult. He had spent a great deal of effort to finally rebuild the Kunlun Devil cult and become the demon lord who controlled the demonic path. In terms of power and influence, he was even stronger than the current #1 demonic path master, Yi Shaonan. In terms of strength, Yi Shaonan was the best among the heroes, but in terms of influence, the moon-worshipping cult was already inferior to Chu Xiu's Kunlun Devil cult. Chu Xiu had finally established his position today by resisting the pressure of the entire righteous path sections. But now that the news of Dugu Weiwei's reincarnation came out, he might have to hand over all these things. With Chu Xiu's character, how could he be willing? Ling Yunzi suddenly realized that the current Chu Xiu didn't seem to be an enemy. Chapter 1072. Almost everyone in the righteous martial arts world thought that the reincarnation of Dugu Weiwei was real, but Chu Xiu was a direct descendant of the demonic cult, yet he thought that the reincarnation of Dugu Weiwei was fake. This was really interesting. In Ling Yunzi's opinion, even if the reincarnation of Dugu Weiwei was real, Chu Xiu might say that he was fake. He might even borrow Zhong Shenxiu's hand to eliminate the reincarnation of Dugu Weiwei. This was all possible. In any case, Chu Xiu's attitude towards this matter was definitely not as simple as the other demonic path martial artists, who just wanted to welcome back the reincarnation of Dugu Weiwei. So this time, perhaps the two sides were not necessarily enemies. With this thought in mind, Ling Yunzi happily sent a message to Chu Xiu. Looking at the message, Chu Xiu narrowed his eyes. His intuition told him that this Han Ping should be fake. Not only because this matter itself was fake, but with this boy's character, it was absolutely impossible for him to be the reincarnation of Dugu Weiwei. For the past 18 years, this Han Ping's performance was very ordinary. He was just an ordinary martial artist from a small aristocratic family. Relying on the fact that his Han family was the #1 aristocratic family in Shu City, and that he had almost never left the southern territory of Eastern Qi, he was short-sighted, like a frog at the bottom of a well. His actions were somewhat domineering. Some time ago, he suddenly awakened and claimed that he was the reincarnation of Dugu Weiwei. But even after that, he was still the same. He did things brainlessly and acted domineeringly. Even after he awakened, the first thing he did was to find a few aristocratic family juniors who had conflicts with him and kill them. But he did not exterminate the entire family, he only killed a few people who blocked him. From this point, Chu Xiu could see that this person was very narrow-minded. Now that he had power, he actually chose to take revenge for a grudge that could not even be considered a grudge. Furthermore, she didn't use her brain when she did things. She had already killed quite a number of people, but in the end, there was still a portion of them left. She was either a saint or an idiot. Even if Dugu Weiwei had damaged his brain in the process of reincarnation, he wouldn't have done such a thing. There were also some speculations from other martial artists and so on. In Chu Xiu's opinion, it was simply nonsense. 18 years ago in the year of Jiaxin was a made-up story, and the so-called heavenly phenomenon when Han Ping was born was laughable. The southern region of Eastern Qi was close to the southern barbaric land. The weather was originally very abnormal. It was not strange for there to be a storm at the time of birth. The probability was very high. There was also thunder that fell in the shape of a ball, which was suspected to be the reincarnation of a true spirit. Although ball lightning was not common, it was not uncommon in a place with many thunderstorms in the south. Just ask the locals and you will know. After reading it, Chu Xiu expressionlessly threw the information to Ling Yunzi. At this time, Ling Yunzi suddenly said, "Official Chu, why don't we go together? How about it?" Chu Xiu squinted his eyes and thought for a moment. "It's not easy for sect leader Ling Yunzi to invite me, I can't refuse." The other righteous sects were stunned. They didn't know why Ling Yunzi suddenly invited Chu Xiu. But after thinking about it, they didn't object. Anyway, they were going to find Han Ping, and Chu Xiu's goal was also Han Ping, so they would meet in the end. At this time in Shu City, Han Ping still didn't know that the biggest crisis had arrived. He was thinking about what he should do next. He had already sent people to Kunlun Devil Cult to pass the news. Chu Xiu now occupied Kunlun Mountain. After receiving his news, he would definitely rush over and welcome him into Kunlun Mountain. Then what? Was he really going to fight with all the righteous sects in the pugilistic world? Just as Han Ping was thinking about this, a few demonic martial arts practitioners ran in a panic and shouted, "Sect leader, it's bad. Great Light Temple, Chunyang Dao sect, Real Martial Arts sect, Forgetful Sword Hut. These righteous sects are all here." Hearing these names, Han Ping's heart also panicked. For someone like him who had never left the southern mountain range in his life, these names almost all existed in legends. He had heard of them but never seen them. At this time, so many people were in front of him. It was very likely that they were the supreme existences of the pugilistic world like the sect leader. This made Han Ping's heart tremble for a moment. But it didn't take long for him to understand. He was now the reincarnation of Dugu Weiwei, the sect leader of the devil cult. They should be afraid of him. Why should he be afraid of them? Han Ping forced himself to walk out, but in the blink of an eye, he was surrounded by Ling Yunzi and the others. This made his state of mind, which had just calmed down, suddenly jump up again. Looking at the many powerhouses in front of him, Han Ping's voice trembled slightly. "What do you want?" Ling Yunzi and the others did not say a word. They looked at Han Ping with a surprised expression. This was the legendary reincarnation of Duguwewe? Something was not right. This imposing manner, fierce in appearance, this cowardly appearance, this dignified devil lord of a generation, even if something unexpected happened during his reincarnation, he should not be like this. At this time, Fang Yundu also felt the strong aura. He took a step and was already behind Han Ping. He looked at the people present and said coldly, "Everyone, do you really want to fight with the sacred sect to the death?" Ling Yunzi and the others did not speak, but Chu Xiu walked in with his people. Han Ping recognized Chu Xiu. He had seen Chu Xiu's portrait. After all, he was still waiting for Chu Xiu to welcome him into Kunlun Mountain. "Chu Xiu, are you here to welcome me into the Kunlun realm after you received news of me coming here? I am the reincarnation of Duguwewe. Stop them. When I enter Kunlun, you will be the hall master of the devil cult." Chu Xiu's expression did not change at all. He looked at Han Ping. Chu Xiu stared at him for a while before saying, "Welcome you into Kunlun? You said you are the reincarnation of Duguwewe?" Fang Yundu shouted angrily, "How dare you? Is the name of the sect master something you can casually call?" Han Ping did not care about this at this time. He quickly nodded and said, "Yes, I am the reincarnation of Duguwewe." Chu Xiu nodded in understanding and walked in front of Han Ping. When the other righteous sects saw Chu Xiu's action, they thought he wanted to protect Han Ping. They immediately wanted to move, but were stopped by Ling Yunzi with a wave of his hand. Just when Han Ping was about to say something with a face full of joy, a soft poochie sound was suddenly heard. The formation-breaking knife in Chu Xiu's hand had been unsheathed, and no one knew when it had been inserted into Han Ping's body, directly stabbing him to death. At this moment, everyone was stunned. Even Ling Yunzi and the other righteous sects had a look of disbelief on their faces. Previously, Ling Yunzi had suspected that Chu Xiu would not so easily welcome the reincarnation of Duguwewe into the Kunlun devil cult. However, he never expected that Chu Xiu would actually stab the reincarnated Duguwewe to death in front of so many people, in front of countless people from the righteous path and the demonic path. What was he trying to do? Fang Yundu was stunned, then he rushed towards Chu Xiu with a roar. "Chu Xiu, you are treacherous." Fang Yundu was surrounded by threads of demonic mist, affecting the power of heaven and earth around him, swallowing all the power. His whole body was like a terrifying black hole. Chu Xiu's expression did not change at all. When the knife fell, time and space stagnated. Under the ethereal slash, Fang Yundu was shocked to find that his body was actually frozen in place, and he could only watch as Chu Xiu's knife fell. With a loud bang, Fang Yundu's attack and Gang Qi were directly smashed by Chu Xiu. His whole body was sent flying by Chu Xiu's knife, and he vomited blood. Putting away the formation-breaking knife, Chu Xiu said coldly, "Treacherous? Old thing, who do you think you are to be qualified to speak to me like this?" Previously, when the phaseless demon sect's sect leader Ren asked you to join my holy cult, not only did you reject him, but you also insulted me. I can't be bothered to lower myself to your level, but now you still dare to shout in front of me? If your eyes are dim, don't come out and continue to show off. Who is the one humiliating my holy cult? This is simply humiliating the sect leader. Although Fang Yundu vomited blood after being attacked by Chu Xiu's knife and was in an extremely sorry state, he still struggled to stand up and shouted, "Nonsense! What right do you have to say that the sect leader is a fake?" Although Fang Yundu had some doubts about Han Ping, it was just a little doubt. In fact, he still trusted Han Ping more. But as long as Heaven's will is not defeated, the Demon Lord will not die. This is the prophecy left by the heaven-weeping Demon Lord. I can easily kill him now, so what if the Demon Lord is not dead? The Demon Lord is immortal, so if he is dead, then he is not the Demon Lord, he must be a fake. Everyone present was stunned. The Demon Lord was immortal, and there was such an explanation? It seemed to make some sense, and there was nothing wrong with it. Fang Yundu was stunned and shouted in disbelief. Then how do you explain the sect leader's martial arts, the sudden increase in his strength, and the scabbard of the demon blade, listen to spring rain? Chu Xiu glanced at Ling Yunzi and the others. Originally, he didn't want to ask in public, but now that Feng Yundu had said it, he couldn't hide it anymore. Therefore, Chu Xiu directly waved his hand and said to Han Lei and Song Shao, "Go, bring all the people from the Han family here, don't miss a single one." This time, Chu Xiu didn't bring too many disciples of the Kunlun devil cult. He only brought Mei Qinglian, Lu Jianghe, and a few other confidants. At present, the Kunlun devil cult's power distribution had been completely established. On Eastern Qi's side, there were Luo Feiheng's 9-branch hall and Blue Dragon Society. Since Chu Xiu had come to Eastern Qi, he could completely use these people. There was no need to bring so many people to Kunlun with great fanfare. Not long after, Han Lei, Song Shao, and the other killers of the Blue Dragon Society came in with more than 100 people. These were all direct descendants of the Han family. Seeing Han Ping's body, the eyes of a middle-aged man with the strength of 3 flower at one's prominence suddenly turned red. He lay on Han Ping's body and cried. Chapter 1073. It was a touching thing to see a father cry over the death of his son, but everyone present was indifferent, including Su Si and the others. It wasn't that these monks didn't know how to be merciful. It was because they knew that this reincarnated Duguwei had been acting tyrannically during this period of time, and it was unknown how many people had died in his hands. Now that he was killed by Chu Xiu, it could be said that an evil person would be dealt with by another evil person. Chu Xiu said to Han Ping's father, "As his father, you should know where he got his cultivation and the things that belong to the Holy Church. Tell me." He touched things that he shouldn't have touched, and had thoughts that he shouldn't have. This is the result. He deserves to die, but your Han family is innocent. Tell me and I'll guarantee your safety. Han Ping was only 18 years old, and he looked like a shallow person who couldn't hide anything. So Chu Xiu was sure that while others might not know where the things that Han Ping had come from, as his father, he would definitely know. But to Chu Xiu's surprise, the Han family had roared and charged at Chu Xiu after crying. He knew that Han Ping had died at the hands of Chu Xiu. When Han Wei and Song Shao brought him here, they'd already told him. He also knew what kind of existence Chu Xiu was, but he still chose to fight with his life on the line. In other words, he'd lost his own life. The death of his son was irreconcilable. Han Ping was his only son. How could he pretend that nothing had happened and tell him the news? Chu Xiu was slightly surprised when he saw Han Ping's father's actions. But in the next moment, his eyes were completely tainted by the demon qi and became pitch black like a deep pool. It caused Han Ping's father, who was charging forward, to instantly stop in his tracks. His mind couldn't help but sink into the deep pool, and in the next moment, he was directly crushed. In an instant, the Han family head's spirit and primordial spirit were crushed. He fell to the ground, no longer breathing. Chu Xiu was expressionless. In such a situation he would not hold back. Although it was a bit harsh to eliminate such a small fry, he wouldn't let anyone try to kill him in front of him and still be able to live. He admired the other party's courage to attack him at a time like this. However, he still had to kill him. Seeing this, Su Xia put his palms together and sighed, "Amitba." Lu Jianghe pursed his lips. These bald donkeys were as hypocritical as ever. When Chu Xiu was killing people just now, didn't you say, "Amitba"? Now you've come out to release souls from purgatory? Chu Xiu looked at the group of people from the Han clan and said indifferently, "Does anyone know what happened to Han Ping? The one who speaks will live." After a long while, everyone was trembling with fear, but no one said anything. Song Shao, kill any one of them. As soon as Chu Xiu's voice fell, Song Shao had a warm smile on his face. With a slash of his saber, a person's head immediately fell to the ground before he could even react. Does anyone know? 3, 2. Song Shao, kill another one. Before the group of people from the Han clan could react, Song Shao swung his saber again, and another head fell to the ground. This time, everyone from the Han clan was so scared that they almost wet their pants. They had never seen such a vicious method. No one said to kill someone, and it was a random one at that. They didn't know at all whose head the next blade would land on, or whether they would be able to survive until the next breath of time. The unknown was the most terrifying. This scene was too much for Su Ci to bear. He sighed and said, "Official Chu, don't you think you're going a little too far by not harming family members?" Chu Xiu laughed coldly. "Abbot Su Ci, now is not the time to be merciful. Not harming family members? What a joke. You've seen Han Ping's information. You should know that during his rise, how many people from the southern region who were hostile to his Han clan have he killed? He killed their leader, and the Han clan rushed forward to completely destroy the remaining people, seizing their power. Within a month, the tiny Han clan has become one of the top powers in the southern region. Do you know how many people have died in the process? They have enjoyed the benefits that Han Ping's sudden increase in strength has brought them. Why can't he harm them? Moreover, Abbot Su Ci, don't you want to know where Han Ping's martial arts and the things he has come from? Seeing that Su Ci had stopped nagging, Chu Xiu turned to Song Shao and said, "Song Shao, continue." Before he could finish the word, "kill," someone from the Han clan had already broken down. A Han clan warrior in his 30s was so frightened that he fell to the ground and cried, "I'll speak, I'll tell you everything I know. I beg you, please don't kill anymore." Chu Xiu squatted in front of him and whispered, "Men bleed but don't cry. It's not a good habit to cry. Wipe your tears and tell us what you know, then you don't have to die. You saved the Han clan, you are the hero of the Han clan." The Han clan warrior glanced at the two headless corpses on the ground and the large pool of blood that had flowed out, and he immediately trembled. Bleed but don't cry? Bleeding so much, he would rather cry. The Han clan warrior wiped his tears as quickly as possible and said quickly, "Actually, we don't know what is going on. A few months ago, Han Ping went to Li City on the southern border with several of his followers to hunt and play. As a result, he came back after half a month, and he came back alone. After returning, Han Ping always locked himself in the house to study something. Except for his father, no one else knew. As a result, some time ago, Han Ping suddenly became a real pellet state grandmaster, and he claimed that he was the reincarnation of Dugu Weiwei, which shocked us. Sir Chu Xiu, we really only know this. Please let us go. Chu Xiu waved his hand and said to Song Shao, "Let them go." He touched his chin. It seems that the key to the matter lies in Li City. Where is Li City? Everyone present looked at each other and didn't speak. They were all martial artists of the Central Plains. How would they know where a small border city was? If it weren't for the storm caused by Han Ping, they wouldn't even come to such a small city like Shu City. At this time, Chu Xiu suddenly turned his gaze to the Han clan warrior who was just about to leave and said, "We just need a guide, you can be our guide." Upon hearing this, the Han family's martial artist almost burst into tears again. This is really bad luck. If I knew this, I would have run away earlier. Li City was another small city near the southern barbarian lands. More accurately, it was the city closest to the southern barbarian lands. It wasn't even under the jurisdiction of the Eastern Qi court. It was a gathering place for a group of merchants and herb gatherers who came and went from the southern barbarian lands. The arrival of Chu Xiu, Ling Yunzi, and the others immediately shocked the small Li City. The martial art practitioners who made a living in Li City might not have seen so many powerhouses in their entire lives. In fact, they might not even have heard of them so many times. However, this small city was only so big. It could even be said that it wasn't a small city. It was more appropriate to say that it was a small town. Everyone walked around here several times, but they didn't find anything unusual. They asked the people in this small city back and forth. They still had an impression of Han Ping. After all, he was bored and came to the 100,000 mountains to hunt. He wasn't afraid of encountering fierce beasts, but they hadn't seen him for a long time. They could all testify that when Han Ping came to Li City, he really didn't take a step out of Li City. But this was very strange. He didn't take a step out of Li City. The city had been built here for so many years. How did he get these things? Could it be that someone gave it to him? After searching for a few days, they didn't find any traces of him. There were already some people from the Righteous Path sects who decided to retreat. Anyway, It was fine as long as it wasn't Dugu Weiwei's reincarnation. As for things like relics, as long as they weren't obtained by people from the demonic path, they actually didn't care much. Lu Jianghu was still a little resentful that Chu Xiu killed too quickly. If he had known earlier, he would have stayed behind to interrogate him. Chu Xiu rubbed his chin and said, "That's not right. There's still something we overlooked." Lu Jianghu snorted lightly and said, "This small place is only so big. What else can we overlook? If the relics left behind by the cult master are really here, then after so many years, with so many people in this small city, why haven't they discovered it? Even they haven't heard of the rumors that the cult master came here in the end." At this moment, Chu Xiu's heart suddenly stirred. He asked the Han family martial artist who was leading the way, "How long has Li City been built?" That Han family martial artist said doubtfully, "A few hundred years, right? I need an accurate number." Hearing Chu Xiu say this, that Han family martial artist immediately shuddered. After thinking about it, he finally revealed a crying expression and said, "My lord, I really don't know. Normal people wouldn't remember this kind of thing. However, when Li City was built, there seemed to be a monument left behind. There should be a record on it." Chu Xiu waved his hand. Immediately, someone went to the center of Li City to check. Finally, they got an accurate number, 456 years. Chu Xiu let out a long sigh. Now, he should be able to confirm that the relics were not in Li City. However, it should be on this piece of land in Li City. Dugu Weiwei's cultivation technique inheritance and Listen to Spring Rain's scabbard were all here. This place was very likely the place where Dugu Weiwei and Ning Xuanji had their final battle. Normally speaking, after the fierce battle between these two powerhouses in the past, it would definitely be like destroying the heavens and the earth, causing great damage to the ground. However, in that battle 500 years ago, apart from the movements they made at the very beginning, no one knew where they had fought to. There were no traces of them at all. Chu Xiu had only found a green city. However, after they shattered the space inside the green city, they came out again in the blink of an eye. They did not stay in the green city at all. Since they could shatter the space inside the green city, why couldn't they shatter other spaces? Li City was only built decades after the two of them fought fiercely. However, before they built it, the space on this piece of land might have already been shattered by Dugu Weiwei and Ning Xuanji. You're tuning in to the Han Li's Immortal Journey YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.